on our agenda would normally be the approval of minutes, but I've asked the city attorney to come down and to address us on the matter of the litigation. Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, Wayne Clement, city attorney. Scott had asked earlier about discussion on the lawsuit and what have you, and I'll give you the same advice that we've always given to the city council when there's been a lawsuit involved. Just don't discuss it. You don't want to say something that will end up being used against the city. So the best thing is just, and if you have a member of the public come up talking about it, that's fine. You can't stop them from talking, but obviously just don't respond to them. That would be our advice. Especially I think you have a member that is one of the plaintiffs in the case, Mr. Oshner.
Yes.
I believe. So obviously you don't want to get into a discussion in public. Obviously, if there was any votes for some reason taking, he would be conflicted out anyway, being a plaintiff. So that'd be, it's ultimately there's a conflict resolution process that has to be gone through. It's a bit lengthy. It's aimed at resolution of these kind of disputes. So really the lawsuit will be abated anyway. It's basically put on ice. Nothing will happen in the lawsuit until that conflict resolution process has gone through. If you have any questions about the process, just in a nutshell, first the city manager is the chief administrator for the city, meets with the town manager, and they discuss basically what are the issues, try to come to any resolutions that they can. After that, it's reported back to the governing bodies. The governing bodies then meet. If it's not resolved in that joint meeting, it then goes to mediation with the governing bodies. If that doesn't resolve it, then the lawsuit basically gets activated, and you go from there. But unless you have any questions about the process, our advice is just don't talk about it. No need.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Approval of the minutes from June the 10th. Do we have a motion?
I'll move.
Any discussion? Or a second? I guess we need a second before we have a discussion. But okay, so now we have any discussion of the minutes? Any changes, amendments? Okay, hearing none. Call the motion. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Public comment. Do we have any public comment this morning? All right. Seeing none, we're going to close public comment. Our new business is the staff analysis of the Finance Commission's potential pre-sale reductions. Cindy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you've pointed out, what we have before us is the staff analysis of some pre-sale rate reduction suggestions that were made by the Finance Commission chairman. The staff has done this analysis using what we call a SWOT, trying to point out the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats inherent in following each of the recommendations. With your permission, what I'd like to do is take each one of them, give you a very brief overview of the staff analysis. It's here in front of you, but hit the high points. Give you the opportunity for discussion, questions, anything that you'd like to add to it. And then what we're requesting is some sort of a separate motion, vote, endorsement, whatever you'd like on each item that we would add to the bottom as we did with the Finance Commission votes and motions. And we would take this consolidated package to the council for their direction to staff as to which of these things we should pursue and which we should not. Some of the things as we get to them are just information items. They're either already done, or being done, in which case, you don't need necessarily a motion and vote so much as an acknowledgement that you've received the information, however you'd like to proceed. But with that, if you'd like, we can launch right into it.
Okay, now let me, there was a large package that went to the finance. They discussed them. They recommended some, and they did not recommend others. We have the total package, both the ones they recommended and they did not recommend?
You have the total package,
Okay,
and at the
great.
bottom of each of the items is the Finance Commission motion and vote,
All
so
right.
that you can see what it is that they decided about those items. Then we would add your deliberations to the bottom, and then take that whole package to council. But no, we haven't left anything out that they discussed.
Thank you. And this,
In your SWOT, do you have any analysis of what any of those items would save in the way of dollar amount?
Yes, and maybe what we should do is just start in.
Yeah,
and
we'll
start
jump in a
moving.
second.
But
And
yes, some of them where there are dollar amounts or at least potential dollar impacts, we've referenced them.
Okay. All right. So I think let's just start with the item number one, and then at the end we'll see what the Finance Commission does as they go.
Absolutely. This first one was something that we discussed at the joint meeting that you had with the Finance Commission back on March the 19th. And that is the idea that rather than financing our capital through cash on an annual basis through transfers to the R&R fund, that we should borrow money for the financing of capital. As you know, we budget that annual transfer of operating revenue to our R&R fund for the repair and the replacement and improvement of our utility assets. Right now, it's running from $3 to $3.4 million a year that comes out of the operating fund and goes over to fund R&R. The last time that the city borrowed money to finance capital was in the 1990s. And so certainly this has been our practice for many years. It's also consistent with the 2009 rate study that PRMG did, where when they showed the source of funding for capital, for the 5-year capital plan at that time, it was almost exclusively money from cash R&R money. Obviously, the majority of our expenditures within the capital fund are actually T&D expenditures for ongoing replacement of things with relatively small values, things like transformers and meters and conduit and poles. So in the aggregate, the number looks big, but the individual items are very, very small. We do capitalize them, but the way that we do it is we capitalize it in a group for any given year, and we go back to the oldest group of things within the capital asset register and remove those and just sort of roll it forward. At your joint meeting back on March the 19th, both you and the Finance Commission voted unanimously to maintain our historic practice of paying for repairs and maintenance through current cash flow and the current capital budget. Now, obviously, if we were to proceed with a true capital improvement, something with a 20 or 30-year useful life, something like what we'll be talking about later, upgrading transmission facilities or building new facilities, that would be the time that we might want to consider borrowing money and spreading the cost of that over the 20 to 30 years. But I think staff's recommending that we continue with our current practice and pay for capital improvements annually through money that we generate in cash each year and save the borrowing for bigger, longer-term projects. The SWOT, if we borrow money for capital, we get a temporary near-term reduction in our annual expenses. The weakness is that funding ongoing maintenance and replacement with borrowing is a departure from what we see as standard industry practices and also reduces our debt service coverage ratios. Again, the opportunity is that near-term reduction in annual expenses could potentially lower our rates a bit, but eventually that annual debt service would be the same or more than the R&R transfer, and we'd be kind of back where we started from. So,
Okay. I think we've got a lot to do. So I think this is we've already talked about this one. So a motion to I'm going to make a motion that we continue the current funding capital with cash until such time as follow along with the.
Just a question: is there any cutoff value where we feel?
Well, let's have a second, and we can.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'll second.
Okay. All right. Discussion.
Take that as a second.
Motion? Did you complete your motion?
Yeah, I'm just the same motion as the Finance Commission.
Okay.
Now, I will say the Finance Commission had two motions. this was their final one. The part that they added to it was that we, later on, we'll talk about having a rate consultant review our rate structure. And we would obviously like to have that rate consultant do what they did in 2009, look at our 5-year capital plan and tell us what the best, most industry standard way is to fund it. And so we will we'll incorporate that into the rate study. And so their motion was to continue our current practice until such time as the rate consultant completes their work and maybe gives us different advice or the same advice about how to fund capital. So that was kind of their wrinkle in their motion and their vote.
Right. Okay. So,
So my question was, is there a limit or a high-end figure for what would be considered a repair and replacement, above which we would go towards capital, or is it just going to be looked at case by case?
It is sort of a case-by-case thing, but it's really more about a little bit about dollar thresholds and also about function. When you're talking about, again, meters and poles and things like that are sort of just ongoing R&R, we're saying funding that through cash is the appropriate way to do it. It's what we've always done. It's what our consultants have always recommended. If you're really building a facility, for instance, if we do put in a major transmission upgrade, you've got a fixed facility so it's sort of be case by case. There's no hard and fast dollar threshold, but it's really more about the function of and the purpose.
The practice of the city staff, at least with respect to the water sewer, has been to bring these projects to us on a case by case basis to approve them. Certainly, poles and transformers.
Understood.
We don't need to talk about or maintenance of the generators. Though we did talk a lot about the work on 2 and 5 that we did last year, or 2 years ago. Started 2 years ago, finished last year, I think. So, and I wouldn't presume that this would change that staff practice. Okay. So, any other discussion? No, we'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
The next item was for us to take a look at our fees and determine whether we are recovering our costs.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
There's a malfunction here.
I'm scraping on you. To look at our current fees for things like connections, disconnections, late payments, penalties, to see how we're doing in terms of cost recovery. We compared our adopted service charges to both FP&L and then also Fort Pierce Utilities, and our adopted charges seem to be fairly comparable. The thing you have to keep in mind on those service charges is you're rarely going to get full cost recovery, because if you have someone who is facing cutoff or has been cut off because they couldn't pay their $200 bill, you can't charge them $200 to turn it back on, or you're not going to get there from here. And so, you're looking for a reasonable average cost. However, what we did discover that we have some situations based on our past practices where we don't actually charge the full amount that we're entitled to charge. And on top of it, we don't have cutoff times. Well, let's put it this way. We have very generous cutoff times. You can come in at 4:59 and pay your bill, your past due bill, and get off the cutoff list that is for the following morning. You can come at 4:59 for same-day service and pay the $50 and be turned back on that evening. And so what has happened is, first, we're not charging what we could, but more importantly, we have set up such generous cutoff times that we're driving the performance of the task into overtime rates. And so what we're suggesting that we do before, and again, our rate consultant will be asked to look at our fees and charges. But what we're suggesting that we do right now is internally, 1, start charging what we're allowed to, and 2, start examining our deadlines and cutoffs so that we come up with something still customer friendly, but a little more reasonable, so that we don't have all of our same-day turn-ons happening at overtime rates after 5 o'clock. Maybe the cutoff time is noon. And then maybe there's another tier of fee for the person who's willing to pay the premium to have something done within a few hours. So if you want to be turned on same day, you have to come in by 11, and that will cost you $50. If you still want to be turned on same day and you want to come in at 4 o'clock in the evening, it's going to be $150. And try to line up what we're performing a little better with what we're charging for it. So, obviously increasing the fees would increase our revenue, but we're talking about a total of $635,000 a year, which is about 0.7% of our total revenue. So even if we doubled our fees, we're not talking about anything significant. What we are talking about is being consistent with our policies and procedures. And the reason we'd like your support for our approach is that anything like this that we do will initially cause us some customer complaints. I guarantee you, when we push the cutoff time back a few hours, even though that's reasonable, we will have a load of customer complaints. And so we'd like everyone's endorsement before we head down this path.
I make a motion that we accept that.
Second.
Discussion. Okay. Seeing none, call the question. All in favor?
Right.
Thank you.
The next item is two things grouped together: reviewing our distribution of rates between our base and fuel charges, and developing a rate structure consistency review. Our last rate structure study was done in 2009, and we adopted revised rates in 2010, first part of 2010, and those rates actually do have some shifts in the way that costs were recovered among the various components. So we think that, having an outside consultant do a rate structure, rate sufficiency study is well overdue, and Council has already directed staff to prepare that RFP, and as an update to this, we have a draft of the RFP completed internally and plan to take it to the Finance Commission at their next meeting and get moving on releasing it, so that we can get this structure done. There's a difference between rate structure and rate sufficiency. What we've been doing ourselves for years is rate sufficiency. That's easy. Revenues have to be bigger than expenses. The component that we've focused on when we adjust rates is the fuel cost component, because that's the one that varies so much on us. But looking at rate structure is asking a consultant to look at our current demographic, our current 5-year capital plan, and make some recommendations about which parts of the rate should recover which parts of the costs. And among other things, look at, for instance, our conservation tier kicks in at 1,000 kilowatt hours and is steep. It goes from $46.10 a 1,000 kilowatt hours to 76 and some change right at that 1,000 kilowatt hour break. Is that the right structure? That's a heck of a conservation incentive, but is that too steep, and should there be tiers? Things like that. So that's what we're asking the rate consultant to do for us. And as a result, it's sort of a be careful what you ask for thing, because, asking an outside rate consultant to review our rates could involve them coming and telling us our rates need to be higher. Or even if our rates end up being lower in aggregate, if we change our rate structure, like any other thing, there will be winners and losers, and there will be disparate impacts on different customer classes. So those are some of the threats and the weaknesses, although we think there's opportunity, too, in really looking again at our rate structure after 5, almost 6 years have gone by. So essentially, Council's already given us the direction to do this, so the Finance Commission's motion was to simply accept or endorse the already given Council direction.
Okay. A motion here, and then looks like we're going to have a second. Discussion.
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
Who's involved in the rate structure study as far as from our staff, from the city staff?
The two primary contacts for the consultant would be me and Tom Richards,
Okay.
the utility director.
Okay. Public comment.
Mark Mucher, 617 Indian Lilac Road. On the subject of the rate study, or this, you're calling it a rate study here, but it's also been called an optimization study, and then they're going to look at other matters. Is this one RFP or two or three, or how?
The rate study and the optimization study are actually two separate things. Initially, we talked about making them one RFP, But it turns out, in looking at it further, they're really two different disciplines. And so, and certainly the rate study can be performed much more quickly, and the RFP can be quicker. We've done it before. So what we're going to recommend is we get this RFP for the rate study out ASAP, and that we include in it a ongoing task, if you will, for whoever is our rate consultant to work with the optimization engineers once they've come up with some recommendations, take their cost savings and model what would happen to the rates. So in other words, kind of in two steps, let's look at our rates as they sit right now and see if we're in the right place. And then once the optimization recommendations come back, take those cost savings and fold them in and model them to see how they would affect the rates.
Okay, that answers that question. It seems like this has flown through the process. The council proposed it, and finance agreed with it, and this group will probably agree with it. But I never heard an estimate of a number on either of those two components. It sounds like they're writing blank checks again.
No, actually, the cut has been approved. The actual RFP will come back to both the Finance Commission and the Council before it's released. Certainly in that Council memo, we'd put an estimate. We've given one before. Just for the rate study component of it, I would guess, and again, I'm guessing, for the initial thing, I think it was $50,000 last time. 30 to 50 is pretty typical. Depends on how much we add onto it between now and when it gets released.
Sure.
And you're also going to bring it back to the utility.
Yeah, I would assume so, yeah.
Yeah.
Although, again, we can talk about scheduling your next meeting because we're trying, to get out in front of this. Our goal is to have this done by the end of the first quarter of next year, because what we've pledged to do is just keep the rates where they are right now until a professional consultant comes in and gives them, their opinion. And so we'd really like to not go through much more than a quarter of next year without some sort of an outside consultant saying, yeah, your rates look good or they need a little adjusting. So yeah. But yeah, we'd like you to look at it too. The optimization study, I don't know if you want to hazard a guess.
Depends on how much. It really will depend on the detail that we want in optimization. I would anticipate that's going to cost considerably more than the rate study. But again, both of those contracts will be brought back to the Finance Utility Commission and the City Council before any contract's signed.
All right. Oh, did you intend to bring these back to the commission at their next meeting? In which case, Scott would have to schedule a meeting prior to the first meeting in August.
The rate study we would do, but
we would like to keep this moving as quickly as we can. We haven't. We've just got the internal draft finished. The Finance Commission has a meeting scheduled anyway, so I was going to talk with them during this meeting about when they could schedule.
And the first meeting in August is the middle of August.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we usually meet the second. We're meeting late this month. We usually meet the second Tuesday of the month, and for something like this, I would be willing to come back for a short single-purpose meeting if you miss that deadline or if our schedule's different.
I believe the first council meeting is like the third Tuesday.
It's the 18th, so we do have some time. So yeah, I was going to ask them today if they could meet again before that meeting.
And the last thing I wanted to say on this point was, if this rate study looks at, and I'm sure they will, the balance between the base rate and the fuel charge. We've been playing with the fuel charge for these past few years and not touched the base rate. And I think they're probably going to move some components into the base rate and maybe out of the fuel charge, but that's going to affect the utility taxes in most cases, because the utility tax is only levied on the non-exempt part of the fuel of the base charge rate. And so just so you all have a heads up on that.
Good point. Everything that we do, affects, every time you move something among the pieces of the rate structure, you're going to affect taxes, or you're going to affect a specific customer class more heavily. Again, by design, certain portions of a rate structure are supposed to recover certain things, simplistically base rates, fixed costs. And so our demographic has changed, our costs have changed. A lot of things have changed in 5 years. So we'd like the consultant to have another look at where we sit, what we're spending, and fixed versus variable costs, and give us some recommendations as to how our structure is more appropriately set up. So. Yeah.
And Jim, you mentioned the optimization will probably be more expensive. But I'll just say from our experience with the optimization of the water sewer, it was a worthwhile investment, and we've saved a significant amount of money.
Yeah, our return
And
on
we say that
investment-
forever.
Yeah, our return on investment, that was very quick turnaround.
Yes, yeah. So hopefully it'll be the same with the electrical. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Number 4.
Number 4, this is one that actually, over a little bit of time, we think has some potential for some savings. I handed out a little supplemental piece of information. If you have it in front of you, it was an org chart, and then there's a chart attached. Before we talk about customer service, I'd like to put it in context, because I think over the time that we've talked about it before, there's some confusion about what functions are in customer service and what is in other places. First of all, the cashiers. When you go into that lobby on the right-hand side, those cashiers are not part of the customer service department. They are part of the finance department. And there is a very bright line between the cashiers and the customer service representatives. Those people who take money from customers have no ability to go into the system and manipulate the bill, and those people who can go in and change your bill never take money. So that's the reason that those are two separate functions in two separate areas. As a result, the cashiers are charged to the electric utility through the G&A allocation. Those cashiers also are responsible not just for utility revenues, but every other cash and check revenue that comes into the city, with the exception of a few minor deposits that get made directly out of Parks and Rec. So they're there for more than just utility, and the city takes lots of other fines, forfeitures, cash, cemetery plot sales, all those kinds of things in, and those cashiers do that as well. The customer service division has two basic components: the actual customer service people that you talk with on the phone or see in the lobby, and then the meter reading field support services side of the house, the people who actually read all the meters for the electric, water, and sewer, and the people who go out and respond to high usage calls, trouble tickets, requests for energy audits. Those are the field service side of the house. If you look at the sheet that's attached, just from a budget standpoint, the customer service budget is within the electric utility, but because it serves water and sewer and solid waste too, there is a charge out to those two entities for the customer service support that's provided for their utilities. And the budget breaks out roughly, if you look at these 3 columns, into 3 areas. The actual physical customer service, people on the phone, people sitting in the lobby, people working the bills and the billing. The second component is the actual cost of the billing and the software. I mean, we have postage, we have annual maintenance on our billing software, and some printing and binding for the bills that get rendered, and that amounts to about $458,000 a year. And then finally, the far right column there, meter readers and field personnel. If you look all in, that's about $494,000 a year. If you consider that they read 33,000 electric meters, about 11,000 water sewer meters, that comes out to under $1 per meter read per month for all-in costs for that function. And I'm told by Tom Richards, who isn't here today, that is a pretty good price considering. So that's one of the other components. And then if you look at the bottom, you see the allocations out to water, sewer, and electric. We charge $425,000 a year to water sewer for our support to their customers, and $78,000 a year to solid waste for support to the customers, leaving a net cost of $1.4 million for customer service for our electric utility. Some of the things that we've talked about with the Finance Commission revolve around upgrading our technology. The first one is on the cashiering side. Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with this, but on the cashiering side, we have been talking with the bank. They came and did what they call a business process review, and they actually brought a couple of banking reps, and they sat in the cashier cage for 3 or 4 days and watched how we do what we do. And they came up with a series of recommendations, the 2 biggest ones being to use what's called e-box. Right now, when you go online and do an electronic bill pay for our utility, you would think it goes bank to bank electronically, but no. What happens is, because we don't have this capability, your bank produces a paper check, and your electronic payment comes into our cashiering cage as a paper check, which is worse than a paper check that comes with a stub, because it doesn't have necessarily the account number, the stub, the OCR thing on it. And so we get stacks and stacks of those that we have to process. The next thing that they suggested would, and the e-box would make it an true electronic bank-to-bank interchange, eliminating all those paper checks. The second thing they suggested was a great technology for us is what's called lockbox. In other words, all those mailed bills would no longer actually come to us. They would go to a virtual P.O. box in the back of a bank processing center, and the bank would take the activity of actually opening all those mailed checks and depositing them, and they've got the technology for exception reporting and that sort of thing. So those two things would alleviate a huge amount of the back of the house activity in our cashiering department. And if you look at the middle of this page here, what I've shown is some of the volumes we're talking about in the cashier cage, and what would take care of them, the process improvement that would take care of them. And if you look at that hand key mail, 6,500 transactions a month are those hand key checks that should be electronic payments. You've also got a large quantity of scannable mail and things that go in to the night drop, et cetera. Now, what you still have a fair amount of, though, is walk-ins to the lobby and drive-thrus. And even if you reduce the activity that happens back of the house, if you have an open window, you have to have a person in it. So simply doing this e-box and lockbox doesn't save us any money unless we also reduce our hours. And so what we're proposing is that we implement these things and we dial back our hours, perhaps close the drive-through window entirely. People can still use the night drop. Scale back our hours inside the lobby, still make it so that people can physically come if that's what they want to do, but not from 8:30 in the morning till 5 o'clock in the evening all day long, 5 days a week. And part of the reason we have it that way now is, as we talked about, at 5 minutes of 5, you can come in and pay that bill and get off the cutoff list. So we're going to kind of slowly scale that back. And we believe that if we make some of these things more convenient or more technologically appropriate, we can alleviate some of the pressure there on the lobby. So that's our first step. The second part of this has to do with customer service. And a lot of this is dependent on the outcome of the electric utility sale. The thing we have in the budget for next year that we have to do is upgrade our billing software. It is 10 years and 11 versions out of date. And we've determined that the cost of upgrading it really doesn't change a bunch whether we sell the electric utility or not in the next few years. So we're not like throwing good money after bad. It really needs to be done. Once it's done, it will have a lot of functionality that the next logical step for us would be to come up with a real website portal, the kind that, for instance, FP&L has, where you can go online, set up your own budget billing, set up your own auto pays, look at your bill, get your questions answered, etc. And if we could truly come up with a good electronic offering, a good website portal, we think that would alleviate a lot of the pressure of people having to call or actually come into the customer service lobby. So first, over time, if we can educate people that they have that other option, we think we could reduce the number of customer service personnel. Second, with a true website portal, if you look at, for instance, the billing and the software costs, there's a huge amount of postage in here and printing of bills. Again, if we're right about the changing customer demographic and we can convince people to go paperless, there's a huge amount of that money you can save when you stop printing bills and mailing them. And so in those two areas, we feel like over the course of the next few years, there's the possibility of some real savings depending on the outcome of the sale by changing the way that we deliver customer service. And yet we think we will still be a responsive and friendly customer service department, because certainly at this point we do kind of bend over backwards for our customers in a way that I think is appropriate and that I think people expect. But I also believe that a lot of people in this day and age, they really don't want to ever come see customer service if they don't have to. They want to pay their bills at night, on the weekend, and on their iPad, and never have to have that face-to-face relationship or that on the phone call. So this is the kind of thing that will take time. Certainly when you start changing software and then change that software and then take some other things and have them put their fingers into the software, you have to proceed slowly and make sure that it's always working, because at the end of the day, you never want an interruption in billing. That's real money. But over the course of the next year to year and a half, we'd like to play some of this out. And our recommendation on this one is let us finish putting together a real schedule, implementation schedule, and a real cost-benefit analysis, and then come back and have some further conversation about this and implement pieces of it as we go, with the e-box and the lockbox being the first ones after the software upgrade. So, and I apologize for babbling because I get excited about that. I don't know if you have seen some of the websites I'm talking about, and say it if you've ever been to FP&L's website. Fantastic. I mean, to the point where I can't see why you would ever call customer service again, but that's what we're aiming toward if we are need to do that.
Well, there's two ways we could push people to the e-bills and these electronic payments. One is to make it so inconvenient for them to come to the city hall that they. Two ways to do this. One is to make it so inconvenient for them to come to City Hall that they're forced there, and I don't want to do that. I think that we should keep the lobby open, the drive-through open, until the demand for it falls, because it is more convenient to do the e-bills and to do the electronic payments. I think that's very important. I think we are very customer-friendly. It is very convenient to be able to do the drive-through and make your utility payment through the drive-through rather than parking, getting out, walking in the lobby. And we do have a lot of people that, since we have very high electric rates, a lot of people that, are struggling. And so it's, I think we need to keep that convenience level up, drop the demand, drop the service as the demand drops. So, I don't think that, I don't sense that you were going the other direction with that. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you that, to some degree, we always want to be a kinder, friendlier utility. And there will always be people that like to come to the lobby. There just will, or that need to. So I think what we're proposing on the cashier part is that we dial back the hours. In other words, we try to at least get a break even off the e-box lockbox by dialing back the hours some, in concert with the changes we're about to make to our cutoffs. Because if you have to pay your bill by noon to get off the cutoff list, then that means you don't have to have the lobby open till 5, but slowly and carefully. As far as the drive-through window, anyone who comes to that window can still use the lockbox. The night drop. So they could still drive through and drop their bill off. They just wouldn't get and here's your receipt kind of thing.
Well, the night drop is the next day.
Well, no, but what we would do is we'd go out and pull out of the box at 1 o'clock. Again, we'd have cutoffs. You could roll in the morning, drop it in there. We'd pull from the box at 1 and make that day's deposit, particularly if we didn't have so much of the scannable mail, et cetera, coming. If you look at the numbers, okay, what you really have is kind of very close to the classic 80-20. We have 20% of our customers, maybe 23 or 24 because of the lack of other convenient options, using our lobby, and the other 80% mailing it in, paying it through their bank, EFTing it, or paying it on the credit card. And so, you've got to I agree with you. You've got to strike that balance between wanting to be friendly and asking yourself how much the other 80% want to pay for the convenience of the 20. I like your idea, particularly with customer service. We would not eliminate anybody until we changed that's my proposal, until we change people's use of our service. And I think it would happen naturally with education. And then when the call volume went down, when the visit volume went down, that's when you start dialing it back. We wouldn't just say, okay, here you go, everybody. Here's the website. Boom, now there's no more lobby. No, I agree with you. That needs to be done by changing people's behaviors over the course of time.
And keep in mind, Cindy, that 20% figure could very well be the number of people that don't have computers or access to them.
Exactly.
And you got to be careful about any ruling or judgment you make that suggests or forces someone, you better get a computer. So I think that's just going to take time to fade away.
And see what happens, Yeah. maybe that your 20% goes down to 10% of the people who just are not going to access our services any other way than in person, and then we construct our lobby hours accordingly. But I would agree. I would never suggest that we should not have a lobby. I think there just comes a point. There are problems that need to be solved. We do have some customers who are struggling. Certainly they come into customer service. We work with them. People that have to have alternative means of paying their bills. I would never want to have a utility where there was no possibility that your customers could come and sit and talk with you when they really, really had a problem that couldn't be solved any other way. So that would be my suggestion. I agree.
What percentage of people use the mail?
If you look here at that page, you're looking at 35, 55, about 55%.
Okay, because as far as paying an ordinary bill without a problem or something you have to discuss with the customer, mail seems to me more of an alternative to the computer than going into the office.
Right, we got 55%.
And the office needs to be open, but it needs to be open, I think, rather than for so many people that have to pay a bill each month, but people that have a problem turning on, turning off, need to discuss it with somebody.
Right. Yeah, the way we're set up right now, you can't start your service without coming to the customer service lobby. You have to.
You're not planning on any deletion of the mail system?
No, what we're planning on is the lockbox, which means the mail would go somewhere else, but it would be transparent to the customer. The beauty of that is, we've had a fair amount of turnover in the cashiering department. And so when you have turnover and then on top of it maybe someone gets sick, we've had days where it was pretty tough to get all that mail processed. And even though we're not really earning much money right now, we like to keep our float going. And so the beauty of the lockbox is we don't have to get involved with that mail anymore. It becomes, even if the price is about the same, a much more consistent method for getting deposits made in a timely fashion. So no, we wouldn't do away with that. That'd still be an option.
The difference that customers would see is the envelope would be addressed to Atlanta or Cincinnati, wherever these.
It'd be a P.O. box.
P.O.
whatever.
box in some other city.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that's actually a bank. And
it's actually a bank back of the house. Yep.
Yeah. So that would be the difference that would see to the customers.
Yeah, completely transparent to the customers. The other thing that's we've done recently is we added the option to use credit cards to our recreation department. I don't know if you've been to Leisure Square, but now they can take credit cards, which was long overdue. And also, we've added it to our planning department. So one of the things we're thinking about doing is adding the option to take credit cards to our cashier window as well, which is something we don't have right now, giving people yet another option to pay. Right now, they have to call the CSI credit people and pay a fairly hefty fee and call on the phone to get paid by credit card. We'd add that option. And then, kind of incentivize. Other places I've seen the use of EFTs incentivized. I've lived in places where when you sign up for your utility service, if you agree to automatic EFTs, they waive your deposit until the first time you bounce an EFT. So there's ways to get people to use incentivize the behavior and get people to use the electronic methods, and that's where you save the money. So
yeah, and we definitely need a new website, and we definitely need access to do that, to control that.
So after all that talking, I think the recommendation is that these are all great concepts and that we continue to pursue them, that you give staff the opportunity to put together a real implementation schedule, this first, that second, and this is the cost benefit of each, and then we'll proceed through each step over the course of probably the next year to year and a half it's going to take for all of this.
Okay. All right. Do we have a motion to accept the staff's recommendation to defer this discussion until we get better
Can I bring up just one question, please? The largest single component in the billing and software is the postage, which I presume means posting bills out to the customers.
Sending a mailed bill.
I'm sorry?
Sending the mailed bills.
Yeah. Some of the corporations that I deal with, once you establish an electronic payment service, they turn around and just give you an electronic bill. And it comes into your email and says, this is your bill for the month. we will charge you X days from now, and, basically gives you time to look at it and dispute it if you want, but essentially you can go away and all those bills will just get paid back and forth automatically without you having to be concerned about it. And that's obviously a next step once you have a properly computerized caching system.
Absolutely. If we can encourage the e-billing and paperless billing, we could save a lot of money both there. And if you look, that $75,000 for printing and binding involves the actual printing of the bills. So, yeah, there's a substantial amount of money that we could save by convincing people to go paperless or finding a way to make the paperless happen.
Well, you can also incentivize them to go paperless by, some small discount.
Mark.
Mark Mucher again. George stole part of my thunder on that item, and I'll move that up first. I'm one of your few EFT customers, and I don't need a computer. Just at one point, a long time ago, I told them to take it out of my bank because it is what it is. And that seems to work fine, except I get a bill in the mail. I also get an envelope in the mail that I have absolutely nothing to do with. I suppose I could turn it in to Cindy, save a few pennies, but then she'd have to ship it up to South Carolina or wherever it is. Is it true that the present billing system doesn't have a paperless capability? In other words, they couldn't send us an email bill instead of a printed bill?
The billing that we have we do not render the bills. We have a third-party billing provider. So, again, we've not, to this point, I don't know. I've not explored the option with them of sorting it out into paper and paperless.
Cindy, do they have 2 floppy disk drives in that billing system so they can take the A out and put the B in at the same time?
We actually send the bills to our billing provider as an electronic file. So the question would be, is there a way we could, within our billing, sort that electronic file? Otherwise, they would have no way of taking the single electronic file with all the bill for that particular billing cycle and segregating them out.
But they don't have the capability of sending email bills as opposed to printed bills?
But again, if I hand them, 6,000 bills for this billing cycle, I need the capability of shredding those into 2 separate files and saying mail these and email those.
Well, I think
I guess off the cuff, I'm not going to solve this here, but I would have to say that our system does not, and I would have to check with them, but we may have that capability once we upgrade the software.
Yeah, 10 years and 11 versions out of date.
Yeah.
Our software doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, that needs to be addressed.
Okay, so
but it's a goal. It's absolutely our goal. I mean, I don't disagree that it's a great idea. I don't think we can right now.
As a wrap up to this part and part of our educational effort here, I would encourage people to take a look at the EFT. It's just a whole lot easier and simpler for you, and probably the most efficient of all the options you've got there. As far as I know, it doesn't cost anybody anything.
And good advertisement for EFTs. If you're worried that your bill is, X amount in the winter and X amount, in the summer, you can combine EFT with budget billing and pick a single number that you're going to pay every month, and that exact same amount will come out of your bank account at a predetermined day every month, and that's the easiest possible way to pay your bill. So come down to customer service and talk to them about EFT and budget billing.
Now, speaking of come down to customer service, are those forms at least available online that you need to bring into customer service?
I don't know if they are. I don't think they are, but I'll check.
That would be an easy thing to do, is to get the EFT forms and the budget billing forms online. All right, so
one more quick item, and I wasn't going to say anything about this, but Cindy repeated it 3 times at least, and that is, you talk about canceling cutoffs, paying the bills at the last time, and you talk about it like it's a bad thing. I would think any way you can avoid a cutoff and then a reconnect would be a good thing, and if that's allowing it up to 5 o'clock or making a phone call with a credit card or a bank a virtual check or something like that, that would be something that we'd want to encourage as opposed to discourage.
Actually, I would say that we absolutely agree with you. If we can avoid a cutoff, that's our goal. We have taken steps over the last year that have led us to a point where our cutoff lists have gone from averages of 50 and 60 people a day to sometimes as low as 3 and 4. We have the phone notification. Our T&D guys personally make phone calls and reach out to people before they are cut off. There are multiple contacts with a person before they are actually cut off. And the other thing that we've done over the last couple of years in being very consistent in our customer service delivery is we've stopped letting people get that far behind on us. And so we work with them so that it never gets to the point where they're in a place where they've got a $500 or $600 or $700 outstanding, residential bill that they can't pay and have to be cut off. So yes, our goal is always, always to do everything that we can before we cut people off. And I would submit that the decrease in the size of our cutoff lists over the last couple of years has been indicative of that. Our big concern, though, is that even if you back it up by a couple of hours, now you're not asking T&D to do those cutoffs or turn-ons on overtime. They're doing it on regular time. And I would submit that if someone is going to be able to pay their bill that day, they would probably have the money by 1 or 2, same as having the money by 4:55. So, again, we want to remain responsive, and we want to provide the very good and kind customer service that we've always provided. But we just want to play with this a little bit to see if we can't become just a little more efficient as well.
Yeah, I would like to come back and discuss these in greater detail. And I think that's the provision that we voted for. And but I would agree that there's a big difference between. I would make the statement there's a difference between paying someone overtime to get somebody off the cutoff list and paying somebody overtime to turn them on. And so I like the idea of the stepped premium. If you want it, and pay by noon, we'll turn it back on today, pay by 4, and it's another $100, $150, I think is the number you mentioned. That's reasonable. But someone to pull them off the cutoff list or to back the cutoff list a few minutes later in the morning so that you can catch up with the bills that came in and paid. I think that would be good customer service. But we did agree that these things will be part of the optimization and the 2 studies. And so we'll have more just time to talk about those in detail.
And actually, this would not, I'm suggesting, would not be part of the optimization study. This would be a staff effort. We think we know where we need to go. We have software consultants in place that handle our software, and so we'd like to tackle this one as staff. I don't think that. So you're not going
to give the optimizers the softball pitch if your software is 12 years out of date?
No. We're going to go ahead and roll with the idea that we need to bring this somewhere close to the 18th century in terms of our customer service delivery and undertake this one ourselves and leave it outside the optimization study if it's okay with you.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Who seconded the motion?
We don't have a motion.
No, I didn't hear who seconded.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we now have a motion and a second?
Yes.
And we all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And if somebody wants to make a different motion than the Finance Commission made, we need to make that very clear. And I think hopefully at some point in time we will have different thoughts than them, but so far so good. Item number 5.
This one is fairly straightforward. It was to determine the use of the fuel oil proceeds and specifically, and then in general to continue to liquidate surplus inventory and assets and scrap. The fuel oil proceeds, without getting too accounting-y, I know Scott will appreciate this, although we did net some cash, it actually shows as a loss on the books because the amount we were paid was less than the book value of the asset that was sitting in the tank. As far as the use of the proceeds, it did add to our unrestricted net cash, and it helped us when we paid that debt off recently. Having an extra, $850,000 in cash was helpful in that regard. We, and T&D in particular, has taken on for the last couple of years, making sure that their inventory was at appropriate levels and liquidating whatever they could without driving their inventory down so low that they're not able to respond appropriately to emergencies and outages. And certainly we'll continue to do that wherever we can. We'll convert things we don't need into cash, but we will also be very careful not to dip our inventory too low so that we can't keep the system reliable.
So do we have a motion? And I have to apologize to the commission. I started the discussion on the last item before we had a motion, so try to avoid doing that. Do I have a motion?
Sure.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion, and I'm going to ask a question. The book loss, that's not a real loss. We actually have additional cash, but the book loss is not going, you're going to account for that in your rate sufficiency study, and that's not going to, some of these questions, Cindy, I ask you, I think I know the answer in advance, but I want the answer out there in the public record so that other people won't come back and ask it. So, but that's not going to sit back and say, oh, we need to raise rates because we lost money.
You're absolutely right. It will not. The rate sufficiency is essentially on a cash basis, and this will be a book loss that will show in our audited financial statements. But when you look at my rate sufficiency, it's really more of a cash basis thing. So, no, this is not going to affect rates at all.
Okay. Thank you.
I pointed out because when you see this quarterly financial statements, you'll see a big old $184,000 loss on disposal of assets. It's been booked that way already, so I just pointed out so people won't say, "Well, what's this?"
Okay.
I missed this last time, I think, or missed asking this question. Does that mean our tanks are dry now?
No, we have one tank that still has $240,000 worth of fuel in it.
Okay, so
but one of them has been emptied and cleaned.
We still have a backup in oil for at least one of the generators then?
Yeah. It was the I don't know if you want to add to that, but they just took the larger one and scrubbed and cleaned it and decommissioned it. So
Exactly what you said. Yes, we keep half a tank in the smaller tank full in case we need it. We haven't needed it in a long time, but sometimes you never know. But we do keep that in reserve. And we thought that was an inventory number that we could handle pretty well.
How long would that run one of the generators or whatever?
It's not very long, but we would order oil at that time. And have
so
it
you
shipped
think
in.
you could get a supply in?
Yes, sir.
Before you ran out?
That is correct.
Because in past hurricanes, way back, I think we've dipped into that a few times.
We have a lot of times when the gas supply or gas pressures become low, we have to go to the oil.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. Any other discussion? And before I call a question, first for the public, there's public comment on any one of these items, but we're moving fast, so you need to be up and ready. So then call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Item number 6.
7, actually.
7, actually.
And this one, again, is one where...
What happened to number 6?
Number 6 was grouped with number 3 a few items back.
Okay.
Number 6 was develop a rate structure consistency review, so I grouped it with item 3 because it was really the same thing.
Great, thank you.
Item 7, the suggestion was to consider reducing payments on our unfunded pension annually because our 5-year investment returns had improved. We make our annual pension payments based on what's called the annual actuarial recommended contribution by our actuary every year, and that's what we're required to do. Unfortunately, although we were optimistically thinking that because our investment returns were better, that when the actuarial valuation came out in March, our unfunded liability payment would be lower. Actuaries have an amazing way of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, and based on a Florida statute that required him to re-amortize the payment because of lower payroll, our payments actually went up for the coming year. So essentially this item, although we had hoped it would turn out this way, is not the case, and our payments have actually gone up, and we will continue to make the annual required contribution that the actuary suggests. So it's sort of more of an information item, and those are the facts kind of things.
Okay, and I noticed the commission acknowledged the facts presented in a motion passed.
Do we need a motion on every one of these things? We've gone almost an hour, and we're 1/3 of the way through.
We're gonna speed up here in a second, but no, you don't. If you want to simply say we acknowledge that and move on because it's not really anything you can vote on.
Let's just sit back. Those that I think that's a good suggestion, or those that we agree with, we'll just I'll put a check mark by them, and we'll just do it all in one motion.
Just move on. Yeah,
and anything we want to disagree with, then we'll discuss.
Right.
All right, is that acceptable to the other members? We'll have an opportunity to discuss everything, but we won't vote. We'll vote unless we want to pull something out, sort of like a consent agenda in that sense. All right, so number 8.
Number 8, again, the suggestion was that we provide periodic rate sufficiency, again, we're doing that. We undertake a periodic update and review of our rate sufficiency forecasts on a quarterly basis. We do budget to actual on a quarterly basis. We think those are great ideas, and we would suggest that we continue doing exactly what we do now.
Okay. Any discussion? 9.
This is a bigger one.
I'll tell you what, let's come back to 9.
Okay.
All right.
9 and 10 are about the same, so we'll come back to 9. We'll whip a few out. Let's go to 11. We'll get rid of some easy ones again.
Let's do the easy ones. Let's knock the easy ones out. Let's skip 10 too.
Let's skip 10. We'll come back to 9 and 10. Page 12, number 11. Defease a portion of the debt. You both recommended it. We did it.
Okay.
Item 12. Refinance the remaining debt. You both, based on Craig's analysis, recommended that we don't do it, and we haven't, and we would continue to recommend that we don't.
Okay.
Okay. See, told you this would get easier. Item 13, appointing an electric utility director has been done. Unfortunately, he's not here with us today, but item 14 and 15 on page 15. Again, this is another one where council has directed us to do this, and we would certainly add the review of outsourcing selected functions to the optimization study. That's a part of it, just like it was with water and sewer, and the preparation of this RFP is underway.
Okay, so
essentially here you're saying that you agree with what council has directed us to do, which is to go out and get an optimization study done, with the idea that you would see the RFP and get to weigh in on the scope and all that before it got released. So now we're to the 4 big ones, item 16 and 17, 18, and item 9 and 10. So if you want, we'll tackle 9 and 10, and then I'll give you over to the city manager, and you can tackle the last 2. That work for you, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, then I think the only thing we need to make a real motion on is number 14, 15. So I make a motion that we add the review of outsourced contracts selected to functions and selected functions to the optimization study, parentheses authorized by council, close paren, period. Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. So we're going back to 9 and 10.
10. Our electric utility, our water sewer utility, and our solid waste and our marina all make an annual transfer to the general fund of 6% of each fund's operating revenue. Transferring revenues from enterprise funds into the general fund is, particularly in electric utilities, a very common industry practice and essentially represents a return on assets to the city for operating the utility and for assuming the financial risks and responsibilities that are associated with operating a utility, many of which would not exist for the city without a utility. Interestingly enough, when I was working on this item, I found a June 2014 Fitch Ratings U.S. Public Power Peer Study that had a lot of excellent information regarding how our peers as municipal electric utilities handle or how they look in terms of certain ratios. And one of them was the transfers to their general funds. The median general fund transfer for 27 of the utilities in the same A-plus credit rating category that we are in was 5.6% of operating revenues. And those AA minuses, the next tier up for us, the median transfer was 6.8%. So the city's 6% is right down the middle of our peers in the municipal power industry. The other thing to keep in mind is that investor-owned utilities pay property taxes, they pay franchise fees, they pay dividend payments to shareholders, all things that the city's municipal utility doesn't have to do. And finally, 6% is a fairly typical franchise fee percentage and would be collected by us if an outside entity ran our utility. For instance, the county imposes a franchise fee of 6% on our revenue on utility customers outside the city limits, and they don't run the utility, and yet 6% of the revenue comes into their general fund to defray their taxes. For fiscal 13-14, the budgeted amount of those transfers and their percentages is shown here. The electric utility is about $5.5 million into the general fund out of a total of $19.6 million in revenues. You know, when you talk about lowering that transfer, we've talked about this before. Every $1 million in the electric utility is about a 1% change in taxes. Every $1 million, in electric utility rates, every $1 million in the general fund is a 25% increase in property taxes. So that's the differential there. You save $1 million in the electric utility, you save 1% of the rates. You add $1 million to taxes, you increase taxes by 25%. You know, having laid out what we think are the reasons that we're in line with industry practices, that it's a reasonable practice, and what the dollars are, the strengths are obviously if you lower that transfer, you can potentially decrease rates. The weakness is if you lower that transfer, you might decrease the rates, but you decrease general fund revenues, meaning either taxes would have to go up or service levels would have to go down. Very simple equation. The threat is that also lowering that transfer from the electric utility would imply that we shouldn't be transferring that from water and sewer or solid waste or marine or any of our enterprise funds because they're all handled consistently. And so that would tend to reduce the general fund even more. The Finance Commission motion and vote was to keep the 6% transfer fee from the electric to the general fund, but that motion passed 3-2, so certainly there was some discussion. You know, having said all that and provided a basis for it, this is very much a policy decision. And one that, as I said, impacts one of two things, either electric rates or, in the general fund, the choice between higher taxes or lower service levels. So that puts it fully in the purview of a policy decision, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have and throw it back to you for discussion.
Okay. I certainly do have some questions on this. And particularly, I think it would have been nice to have had this discussion prior to the setting of the budget and the setting of the tax rate for the next year, so that a recommendation, if we made a recommendation to the city council to lower the transfer, they would have had an opportunity to. Well,
they haven't set the final tax
rate.
They haven't set the final budget.
Okay,
they set the preliminary not to exceed. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great.
The public hearings are in September.
Okay.
For the final.
I thought there was a date where you set the rate, you can't go higher. You set a tax rate that you can't go higher then.
That has already come and gone.
Okay. So
the choice would be service cuts.
So yeah. So that would have it would have been nice then to have had this discussion prior to that point.
But certainly council did have some of that discussion themselves at the budget hearings, if I'm not mistaken.
They didn't have the opportunity to get our advice on it. So
we could have been there if you wanted to, but nobody showed up. But I would say that we want to leave it the way it is, and that even if we cut it to zero, you're not going to lower the electric rates enough to be of significance. You're going to lower them 4%.
5-6%, something like that.
Well, one of the things that we've looked at is there isn't much that we can do in any one particular area to make a significant cut in rates. And that was because we've looked at these items, and this is the one big number, the relatively big number that we have control over at this point in time, other than renegotiating contracts, and which we'll discuss that later this morning. But this is one opportunity to lower the rates about 6%. There's a few of your assumptions here that I just want to discuss. There's a difference under your threats. Lowering the electric utility transfer would imply that transfers from other funds should be reduced as well for consistency. With respect to all the funds except water sewer, we don't service on a captured basis, a monopoly basis, outside ratepayers. If you want to come to the marina, you're free to come to the marina. If you want to power up your boat or raise your sails and go someplace else, you're free to do that. So I think there's a distinction between the electric utility and the other utilities with respect to the transfers to the general fund. So I would question that assumption there. You make earlier up here you say the assumption of the financial risk and responsibilities associated with the utility. It's one of the justifications for transferring funds to the general fund. It's become very clear through the negotiations with FNPA that the financial risk are borne by all the ratepayers. It's all the ratepayers that are the security for these bonds, the FNPA bonds. And so it's not just the city taxpayers that are bearing the financial risk of this utility, but all the ratepayers and system-wide bear the financial risk of the utility. And with respect to return on the assets, I've been thinking long and hard about what particular assets the city of Vero Beach has provided for the utility that's not been paid for by all the ratepayers. The only thing I can think of is the land at the power plant. The power plant itself has been paid for by all the ratepayers. And so I would question and challenge some of these assumptions that went into your answer. If there are some assets that you know of that the city has provided that's not been paid for by the pool of ratepayers, I would. Like I say, I've thought long and hard. I can't, other than the land, I can't think of any. Jim, do you have any? Are there any other assets?
Yes, sir. I would like to address that. I think, number one, the asset that we really have that we allow that the county collects 6% on are the use of our roads. We maintain the right-of-ways, we trim around, we build our sidewalks around utility poles if necessary. So we provide an essential passage in transportation and transmission of the utility itself without those roads, without easements that we acquire. And so, therefore, it is a return on an asset that is used.
But those improvements, are they paid for by the city taxpayers, or are they paid for through the utility?
The improvements on the streets are paid for by city taxpayers. It comes out of your 1 cent or your ad valorem taxes.
Okay.
The other thing, talking about the risk to the city, even though you're right that the utility ratepayers pay the bond indebtedness and the debt service of the city, if we had a foreclosure or if we did not pay the debt service or if we had some issue where the electric utility went into foreclosure, it affects our bond rating as a city. So the city does take a risk. If something should happen and it went bankrupt in the electric utility business, the outside city ratepayers would not be affected by the negative bond impacts that it would have on the city, because even though we do pledge our rate-paying revenues, as you know, the entity's name that is on those bond covenants is the city of Vero Beach. And so we do have a risk analysis that we take. The other thing that we have and risks that we have are, for example, accidents, claims, and these type of things. Most of that is paid for, except sometimes they reach over as to when they file suit against the city, they'll file it maybe against the electric utility, but they also file it against the city for allowing a utility pole to be in a right-of-way. And the guy runs into the utility pole. We pay a lot of that out of the electric, but if the claim is directed directly to the city, then obviously our general fund has to pay for the insurance that would cover those type of claims that could be associated with that. So there is a risk analysis that I think that provides for the operation. And again, typically speaking, as Cindy pointed out, that 6% is a typical charge the cities put for allowing them to use i.e. the right-of-ways or the facilities. And then a lot of times we have interaction between utilities and general fund. For example, maintaining parks that may have utility lines in it. A lot of times those costs are borne by the public works and not necessarily charged to utility because it's an overall operation in Riverside Park or whatever the park may be. So just to give the other side of the story.
I appreciate that, and we're having this discussion, and I appreciate the information that we would not be maintaining Riverside Park the same level if we didn't have power lines going over it. But I think there's some things here that, again, I question some of these. I think we should lower this. Personally, what I would like to see us do is to lower our general fund transfer until we are at the average municipal rate. The average rate.
Tax rates you're talking about?
No.
Oh.
Electric rate. Until we can make the average electrical municipal rate, I don't think we're actually making a profit. Okay. Just because we have a monopoly and we can charge anything we want, we could transfer anything we want to the general fund. I'm not saying that we can ever compete with Florida Power and Light, but I think we should be able to compete with the other municipalities.
What is the average municipal rate?
Close
You know?
to it, aren't we?
We're very, very close to it.
We're close to it, but we're not
because
there.
We went down that 4%.
And we were-
the answer is, I don't remember.
I don't have the most recent FMPA report from me, but we were pretty close to the middle before that last cut, so
Yeah.
it might be there.
We have an IOU that's in the state that's higher than we are, Gulf Power.
And again, Scott, just for clarification, I mean, what I tried to put out here were relatively factual pieces of information. That is what the Pierce Power study shows. We're right down the middle. That is what we transfer in. That is what 1% is. $1 million means to the electric, what $1 million means to taxes. But I'll go back to what I said before. This is a classic policy decision. It really does have a disparate effect on ratepayers versus city residents. And so the argument becomes, where's the more appropriate place for that? Do you have the right to defray taxes because you've taken on the challenge and the risk of running an electric utility? Certainly all of our peers in the municipal power industry believe that they do, and to about the same degree. Or do we think that somehow we need to do that and then also not take any money away from that to defray our taxes?
At the
and
risk,
classic policy decision, I have no...
Right, I understand. At the risk of discussing, I'm going to mention the lawsuit. I don't want to discuss the details of the lawsuit, but I think that I would wonder how many of these municipal utilities have 61% of their customers that are outside of the tax base, outside residents, and what that ratio is.
We have 61%.
Don't interrupt me.
Well,
I'll let you talk.
Well, you don't seem to.
I'll let you talk. And how many of that? And that's one of the issues. If we didn't have that 61%, we wouldn't have had a lot of the problems that have developed in this community. Because that's where the ratepayer rebellion started from. It's primarily a lot of people in the county are behind that. The Shores are suing us for that. That's one of the issues of the lawsuit. And so that's just, again, I just would wonder what that number is. So go ahead, Herb.
Okay, if you look at the history of all of this, the only reason we have those people out there is because the county came to us and asked us to put electricity out in those areas, so they developed them. And the city council at that time should have annexed all those people into the city when they did it. And they didn't do it because they were for a reason. Now, all those people, if they really are interested in getting their vote, they can still annex into the city if they want to. And then they wouldn't have that problem. They would have a vote. So, you can argue the one way, but I think we're doing the right thing right now. We're right in the middle. We seem to be right in the middle of our rates, and we ought to leave it that way.
Just a point of clarification.
Go ahead.
On Riverside Park, you made the statement, Mr. Chairman, that the maintenance rate should be changed.
Tongue in cheek.
I know, but the fact of the matter is that when we don't charge off to the electric every time we go under one of their utility easements. Okay, sorry about that.
No problem. I want to add to this idea that we're in the right area. In fact, we may be a little low, actually, but we're certainly not what I consider high, or if we are high, we're talking, in my opinion, less than 0.5%. So, and that can be argued forever. But if we're in this business, then we need to get paid for being in this business. And we need, if not a return on investment, it's a return on income, I guess. And we need to accept that. Every utility, I believe every utility, one way or another, in the state of Florida and across the country, who is a local run utility, gets a return on investment or a transfer to the general fund. I think regardless of how much we have to charge, this is a fair price for being in this business, for running the business, for even trying to get out of the business. Because in the last 2 years, a fair amount of money that we've been spending and adding to our rates has been in trying to get out of the business. So long as we can't get out of the business or we haven't found a clean way out, we deserve a 6% payment for being in this business, for keeping up all this stuff, for having all the infrastructure that we have. And I'm strongly opposed to any substantial change in that rate structure, or in the, not the rate structure, but in the amount of profit we receive. Exactly how you count it might be something else. But
Well, that's, I'm going to go back and clarify what I said. I think when you price in a monopoly, when you have a monopoly in terms of pricing, you can charge anything you want. My suggestion would be, and I don't think that they're going to get a motion to make this suggestion, but what my suggestion would be is that we lower the transfer. We'd keep a transfer at such a place that we're at the average for the municipals. That we can't compete with Florida Power and Light. But there's some sort of external benchmark for what our rates should be, and that's the question. Right now, our rates are based on our 6% transfer plus our cost. And why aren't our rates based on would be a reasonable profit, and then we can transfer that? Now, Bob, a couple of specific questions for you. When you say that we are in the utility business, who's the we that's in the utility business?
city.
The city's in the utility business. I think the we that's in the utility business is all the ratepayers. We have about a $30 million reserve.
They're part of this. Yeah.
Correct. The $30 million reserve that we've built up over the years. And in the event of the sale, that was $30 million that was going to go to the benefit of the city. We had various plans to use that. Is that not correct? But who's the we that paid the cash to build up the $30 million? That we is 100% of the ratepayers. 100% of the ratepayers paid the rates that built up the $30 million transfer, or the $30 million fund. So I think when the we that's in the utility business is the 100% of the utility customers, not the 49% or 39% of the city taxpayers that are utility customers. But I think that, and we've always tried, or I've always tried to address, as we talk about managing the utility, to manage it for the benefit of all the ratepayers, not just the city ratepayers and not just the city taxpayers. So that would be my recommendation, is that our rates, any transfers would be based on profitability, and that profitability be tied to some external marker. And what I might suggest, again, is the average municipal rates across the state.
Now, would you also, on the other counter side of that, be recommending a tax increase to make up the revenues, or a reduction in services? And I think that's going to be critical, because one of the questions you did ask, what other city utilities have 60% of their ratepayers outside the city? There are very few. There's no question. But there are very few cities that provide the park service for in excess of 60% of the users. The second thing is, there's very few cities that a big portion of the ratepayers have only one way in and out of their house, and that is to come through the city. South Beach, as an example, cannot leave their home and get to any function anywhere without coming through the city and using a city service. Very rare do you see that in any other area. What was brought up about annexation, and back in the old days, when I was first getting into this, the key was, as you extended water, sewer, or electric, you signed an affidavit that said you would be annexed once you became contiguous to the city lines. So Vero is unique. I mean, we chose that. That's not something that the people on the South Beach chose at the time that they weren't going to come here because the houses weren't even built. But I think we're a unique community in the way that we are designed and the services we provide. I dare say that there are very few parks in Indian River County that will compare with Sexton, JC, or Humison Park, and especially on the numbers of people. I dare say you will find very few cities that have 3 beaches that are lifeguarded that the county doesn't contribute to. And so, you can take one item out and sort of put it in, but you need to really look at the 50,000-foot level. That our community is really a unique community in the way we do things. But I cannot argue that over 60% of the ratepayers are contributing to the operation of the electric utility. The name is the City of Vero Beach Electric Utility, which I guess sometimes gets confused because you have Disney resorts at Vero Beach, and it's 2 cities away. But so it's,
Yeah, well, Herb, I think if you, I agree with you. We should have annexed them, and if you want to make a motion that we recommend to City Council that they pursue that, I will second that motion because I think that would eliminate a lot of the problems.
Unfortunately, the citizens have to want to annex.
Well,
it's not us. We want to annex them. It's more they want to annex to us.
The other question that you brought up was using the surplus, and that's a separate issue. If you want to use the surplus to help pay down our costs and therefore lower the rates, fine. But I don't believe that our profit margin on the utility, regardless of who the customers are, FP&L doesn't decide because they've got customers in Vero Beach, they're going to give a different price. In fact, they may well give a higher price so they can pay off the bonds for the first few years.
Public Service Commission controls the pricing.
Yeah.
I can't charge you more than I do chairman or something. So.
Our stuff does go through the Public Service Commission, although
rate structure
there's a
does,
question
not the rates.
Of how well they go over it. But anyway, I feel strongly that we need to establish, and we did years ago, and this subject has come up almost with every budget, in my understanding. And we need to establish, which we already have, or reestablish what our fair profit is. That fair profit should go across all income, as we're setting it up now, or all assets, or whatever. And that should be it. And I think right now we've already established 6%, and I agree with that.
I'm glad you mentioned something because I may have said something that was a little confusing. I don't recommend that we use the surplus at all to adjust rates. We need the surplus. I was discussing the surplus in the post-sale environment. That we had different options that we could do with that. So let me clarify that. I think, and Jim, going back to some of your questions, I have a unique perspective in the last few months. I've been spending a lot of time down in Boca Raton and at their beaches, and I know, first of all, you have to pay to park at their beach.
Pay to get into their beach.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the fact that we don't have to pay to park at the beach. I appreciate the fact that every morning our barbecue grills are clean at our beaches.
And our restrooms.
And our restrooms are clean. Our restrooms are clean several times a day, as I understand it.
A minimum of 2.
Minimum 2. And you go into a county park, and the barbecue grills are full of old coals for the most part. Most of the times that I've been there, I appreciate that. I like the way we maintain our city. I
But that
question.
attracts county people because we have a higher quality at a zero price.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, though, that I'm trying to recall the number of Florida Power and Light meters that are in the Indian River County that are not, that are here. And I think it's several hundred thousand. And those several hundred thousand Indian River County residents get the benefits of the city of Vero Beach. And we only have that 61%, which is what, 25,000 meters, 10, 50, I don't know. Cindy's going to do the calculation now. And 20,000 meters that we justify, the rates that we charge based on, it always comes back to, well, our parks are so nice. Well, our parks are nice for everyone in the county. Those 20,000 county residents are paying part of that cost. I think that there's an issue that needs to be addressed with the county, with recreation, with the beaches, and I don't know what the answer to that. It certainly isn't meters, parking meters.
I agree with that.
Okay, and because I find that reprehensible that I go to the beach down in Boca Raton and I have to feed a meter, but there needs to be some sort of policy decision going forward, I believe, that equalizes that, because I don't think it's fair to charge $20,000 or to justify for these 20,000 meters when there's several hundred thousand other meters that are getting these benefits. By the same token, there's not, I don't know how many county boat launch sites are there.
They're fighting over one.
They're fighting over one now, but we have
the two best.
Yeah, we have and we don't charge for that, and I think that's great.
But, Mr. Chairman, if I may interject, I think a policy has been determined how we pay for that, and that's the 6%. The second thing is you've got to remember those 20,000 meters are the closest proximity and more likely to use city facilities. And a lot of the meters that you are talking about may or may not come into the city. They have other services in other locations. So if you were really doing this under a business model and you were saying who should be the people who should pay, you would go to, number one, a user fee of some type, which is out, so we don't do that. The other is what is the proximity and the most likely to use the facilities. And you're right, recreation is one of those, but I mean, you can break it down to streets and operation of streets and the drainage. I mean, there's a lot of those canals and a lot of that water that comes through our city. We have some of the largest baffle boxes in the entire Indian River County that we put in. Did not charge to the electric utility, but the fact of the matter is we probably got some of that money indirectly from the electric utility. But a policy has been made of how to pay for that, and that is our enterprise funds, along with our ad valorem taxes, along with the 1 cent sales tax option, will pay for those type of operations. And so, we can. I'm sure no one said that the close proximity of the meters is where we're going to put the meters, so therefore they're going to pay for the parks. But I'm justifying in my mind of how we arrived at some of these issues and how, if we really wanted to say, how do you justify it, I think it can be really relatively justified. It's our good friends up in Indian River Shores. The fact of the matter is they have one park. It happens to be a county park, the tracking station. And I don't know if you all ever go up there. I happen to go up there quite often. And there's very few customers or people using that park compared to ours. And I dare say there's a down migration. The other
Can't
thing
park
is,
there.
well, you can. I mean, they got
much.
pretty good. But at the Wabasso is where you don't get any parking. But the other thing is, for example, the theater and the museum, both heavily funded, I think, out of either South Beach or Indian River Shores. But the parking facilities, the maintenance out in the park, in order to give that ambiance of going to it. I mean, you wouldn't want the theater out in the middle of a wooded area. So I'm saying that, again, the folks that migrate down there, and I think if you probably looked at some of the ticket sales, there's probably a pretty heavy number coming on the Barrier.
Well, Jim, I agree. I like Vero Beach the way it is. I like the fact that our restrooms are clean and our grills are clean. My question is in the long term, is the justification of these 20,000 meters versus I think it's 200,000 meters, as I recall, being the ones to pay that freight. In fact, Mayor Winger, the first time you and I talked, it was in the lobby here, and I was at that point in time a county resident on the utility commission, but a city utility customer. And you mentioned these things, and it's been a long-term discussion. But at that point in time, I was a member of Leisure Square, and I had to pay the extra fee as a county resident to be a member of Leisure Square, even though I was a city ratepayer. At that point in time, I lived right behind George's son, and in that same neighborhood, his house was right behind mine, and so, I question there's a fundamental flaw in this logic, and that we go back and we justify all these wonderful amenities that all the county people can use, and only 20,000 ratepayers are the ones that have to contribute towards that. And I don't know what the long-term answer is to get 100% of the county to help us keep up to our level. I don't know that there is an answer. I think that part of the problem is we're the city of Vero Beach, and we have a nice place, and we welcome our guests and our company and our neighbors. And, that's just the way it is. And so there's an extra cost to live in Vero Beach. But I just, going back to the logic of the 20,000 versus the 200,000, paying this, it bothers me.
Well, and it's very difficult to justify. What I'm saying is that the rationale that I use, that I guess I have to use, and there's no question, no one sat down and said, this is where we're going to put our electric meters because they're going to be the most likely to use our parks. But the fact of the matter is the policy has been set, and the policy has been in place for many years in which they're doing, and being heavily involved in trying to sell this utility has really been a challenge too. But the key is that then the policy would have to change, and we would have to go to some other mechanism of affording those amenities that we have. But coming back to you paying out of county or out of city rates to go to Leisure Square, we raised somewhere in the neighborhood of $45,000 in fees for recreation. 50. So, well, let's say that we raised $50,000 in fees, and that includes out-of-county rates. It cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.5 million to run the place. So, it is nice that we had those out-of-county fees. And at one time, when you had the joint city-county operation, which obviously was before me, but was really a good thing in the fact that it was joint, and I think there was a way of paying for it and justifying not only just the 20,000 meters. I think once that broke down, and it became a real challenge at least on the city's part.
And the county was the one that pulled out of that recreation when we used to do them both.
That's my understanding. We wound up with the building that we were paying on until we finally figured out their name was on the title. So.
Yeah, no, it definitely was the county. And I guess the issue of the Leisure Square is burned into my memory because I think I had just paid that bill the day before the mayor and I had this discussion, and I'm thinking, well, gosh, I'm paying twice then to support the Leisure Square in a sense. But
coming back, I guess, to the fundamentals of this, and it's very difficult to try to justify historical perspective since most of us weren't around making those decisions. The only thing I can say is if somebody asked me why should there be money used from an outside ratepayer into the operation of the city, is that in my mind, outside ratepayers do use city facilities. It's not totally unused. And again, it's sort of a uniqueness of the city of Vero Beach, using South Beach as an example, that have to come across city streets in order to go anywhere. So So it is sort of a different and unique community, and hopefully we'll work through some of our
And a wonderful
challenges.
community.
It is a wonderful community.
Like I say, I've been in other beachside communities that are often
Yeah, we're,
compared to us, but they don't.
and the unfortunate
They don't compare
part,
at all.
Part of the things that makes us unique and beautiful and wonderful are outside ratepayers contributing.
I understand. I think I have any other comments from the board? We have some public comments.
Just one quickie, that this all developed by accident over 50 or 100 years of how we are now paying for things, but there we are. And one good excuse for that is that we were able to take a profit from all ratepayers for 50 or more years. And if we change that, we really need to have, what else are we going to do? The other side of the coin.
I understand, but you use the term profit again, and I'm an accountant, I'm a CPA, as Cindy said. Profit's a term that's very squirrely when you talk about municipal monopolies. Profit, in my business and in anybody's business, they can only set the price at what the customer's willing to pay. We can set the price at whatever we want to. And so that's why, again, my idea would be to have some sort of benchmark outside ourselves to base our rates on before we could declare that we had a profit. But Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a danger of making me stand up there because I come up with more items. I stood up to talk about 2 quick items, and since then I've come up with 3 more. And the first 2 are that maybe we should change this to the Utility/Recreation Commission, because we've been talking about recreation more than utilities lately.
Well, we fund recreation in large part.
And the second is, I didn't realize you were such a beach bunny. But I take exception to something that Cindy said, and that is that we should have 6% across the board just to be consistent. When our electric utility is, I don't know whether overpriced is the right word, but we're 25% higher than our closest competition, whereas in the other utilities, I understand we're, at or below market. Solid waste, water and sewer, marina. But we're definitely high in electric for the reason, because for the reasons you stated, we can determine how much profit we want to make. Another thing, and I think I forgot one of them, but I'll go to your concept of going to the average of the municipal utilities. I want to tell you a couple things about that. You mentioned, Cindy, that the FMPA said we were just a little above the average. Actually, it's the FMEA, but I think they're both the same.
It is FMEA.
They are the same. And the other thing is that 2 things about that. Their numbers, some of them are wrong. Secondly, they're totally unweighted, which is totally ridiculous. They weight Chattahoochee's rate the same as OUC's or Lakeland's. Lakeland last month went up on their fuel charge. Chattahoochee went down. And again, that doesn't really apply to the fact that they're unweighted, but an unweighted average is ridiculous in this business. So first we'd have to determine what a weighted average is, and I've been looking into that. I don't know how to do that without going out and resurveying all the municipal utilities in the state as to what their capacity is. And I think you drove the 5th one out of me. But
No, well, good.
Thanks.
Mr. Wilson.
Good morning, Commission. I just wanted to mention that what we're talking about here, we're talking about words like profit of a monopoly. You can only have profit of a monopoly if they have a choice of where they go. And I can suggest that if people had a choice of where they went, whether it was FP&L or the monopoly that we charge, the people have already said what choice they would make in more than one referendum and more than one survey. So you are right, Mr. Chairman, that when you are a monopoly and you can charge whatever it is that you feel like charging, it's more like instead of based upon the market, it's based upon whatever we need. And when you've got a base, it's like sending a college kid to an ATM with an unlimited balance. You just keep going and you buy whatever it is that you feel like you need. We live in the most wonderful city in the world, and we need to protect that. But you also mentioned things like the policy. And what's been happening, unfortunately, is that we have been making some policies, and we've made policies for decades now that were based on poor legal representation on the city, was based upon probably what we now know was faulty decisions made by previous councils. And so that policy now that we're making, that we have wonderful parks, and I love our wonderful parks, but some of our ratepayers are saying to us, we don't care about your policy. We don't agree with your policy, and we're going to take our people out of your policy. And so they're taking the policy. What we've done now is we've gotten a revolt. They're taking the policy out of our hands. They're taking the policy. They've made steps now to make their own policy where they get to decide, because they've decided that the wonderful parks that we offer do not allow us to charge 20% more for electricity year after year after year. So what's been happening, this is the first glimpse as to the result of the people that have undermined the potential sale of Vero Electric to FP&L. This is the first result of the undermining of that activity. So I'm interested to see, I've learned today that actually the assets of the utility are not the city's assets. They're the utility's assets. And even when you talk about my friend who's doing a wonderful job, city manager, but when he talks about the sidewalks, if something happens to the utility, the sidewalks aren't a part of the collateral. The sidewalks aren't up for having to go someplace. The FMPA can't come in and confiscate our sidewalks. But you're right, it is the ratepayer. And we're learning that the ratepayers have power. So, we have put ourselves in this danger, and working our way out is going to be very, 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 very difficult. But I'm learning a lot today, and let's look at some of the alternatives. I'm interested to know exactly what the assets are, because the land is the only thing I could think of. And is that leased? Is that leased by the utility?
That's a specific question. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Does the utility pay a lease payment to the general fund for the land, as Florida Power and Light was going to pay $1.5 million a year to use it?
No, you're talking about. No, there is no payment for use of easements or property where the plant. As a matter of fact, I would presume that property is an asset of the electric utility.
I'm not positive, but it may well be on the books as an asset under the electric utility.
I would presume it is, because the substations, if they had to acquire a piece of ground, they would own that piece of ground as an asset of the utility, but where the wires run would be just probably easements and not ownership of properties.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So let's call the question then. Or
I have a question.
We don't have
The last speaker talked about Vero Utilities being a monopoly and setting whatever prices it chose, and yet we're just been talking about the fact that the only part of the cost which is strictly under control of the utility and the council is the franchise fee, and the franchise fee is right in the middle of all of the other franchise fees that other cities are charging. Am I correct?
The transfer, and the transfer is right down the middle of what our peers are charging.
franchise fee. It's a transfer fee. Okay.
It just happens to be the
So
same
then the
amount.
question is not, are we making exceptional profits, but where are we raising our costs to the point that apparently we are 25% higher than FPL. So what is it that, are we wasting money? Are we investing money uselessly? Or what are we doing with that 25% that other people aren't doing?
And that's one of the things that the optimization study is going to help us with. We've looked at these items, and we're trying to tweak here and there. But there's some, I think, hopefully our biggest problem that we have is we've made some decisions, a long-term cost of fuel, and as Mayor Winger said many times, when you go long term in a commodity market, the commodity market always turns around and bites you. I've heard you say that many times from up here. And so we've gone long, and we've gone long on coal, and that we're paying. That's fundamentally, it's in those decisions that were made, in some cases, decades ago. And so what we can adjust now is small. But I don't think anybody's saying we're making an exorbitant profit. But the question is in my mind, is can you even use the term profit in a monopoly background? And while Florida Power and Light is also a monopoly, and they do pay a rate of return to their investors actually put up money. And their rates are then also controlled by the Public Service Commission. Now, there's lots of debate, and I don't want to get into the debate as to whether that's a real control on Florida Power and Light or not, but at least in theory, it's a control of their rates. So, all right, so we don't have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, for clarification, that was corrected by the mayor. The electric utility does pay rent at the airport. No place else but at the airport, and it goes to the airport fund, which cannot contribute back to the city. That's why you don't see a contribution back to the city. But they pay the going rates of airport rentals.
Okay. All right.
And so does our public works and anyone else located out there.
Mr. Chairman, I have a comment when he's done.
Okay.
I wanted to, first I want to ask, is it not, did you not say that the Public Service Commission does review the rate
structure?
So,
And our rates, but without any control over them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're informational items to the PSC.
but they do a review. They can come back. We don't agree with this, or do they
But
just say?
they can't regulate our rates, but they can come back and say your rate structure is discriminatory on a class. And that's where they really have the jurisdiction. The rates they get to review. Now, if we were making an exorbitant profit or our rates were, the highest in the country or something, they probably would have some jurisdiction. But theoretically speaking, the only thing they do is we forward them our rates and they have them on file. And but our rate structure is the component that they really look at.
Well, but my point is that somebody is reviewing to some extent what's being charged. I mean, you can't just arbitrarily say this is what we're going to do without at least having it reviewed by someone.
Absolutely. And, the rates that we have right now were the ones that were given to us by the last rate structure study in terms of the base rates and the fuel the usage charges. So all we have modified over the last years is the fuel cost component in response to exactly what you pointed out, Mr. Chairman. That's the one part of it that's fairly volatile, and when it goes up, our rates go up accordingly to recover the costs. We may have a monopoly, but I know you've all looked at our quarterly rate sufficiency. We're not setting rates to generate tens of millions of dollars excess funding. We are running very close to the bone. Under $1 million on $90 million is about the margin we're running when we set those rates on a quarterly basis. So certainly we set them sufficient to cover our costs, but we're not, just, hey, let's pick a rate and charge everybody.
Well, not tens of million, but $6
money.
million.
Yeah,
But
5.4.
5.4. Okay, thank you. 5.399. But with respect to the PSC's
Review.
ability to review our rates, and when we do this optimization of the rates, when we do the rate study, not the optimization, when we do the rate study, I'm assuming that we may make a difference between our base rate and our fuel charge, and that adjustment would then have to be approved by the PSC.
We would send them the tariff sheets and update to the tariff sheets that we have right now, but I think what Jim is saying is that the rates themselves are not under their purview. In other words,
Right.
They can't come back and say, well, we think your base rate's too high. But if we sent them a rate sheet that said we're going to charge everyone that lives on the west side of 60, an extra $50 a month, then they would say, no,
It was
that's
if it was discriminatory in some sense.
Exactly.
But the only review of our rates is the Finance Commission, the Utility Commission, or we'll start off with staff, finance, utilities, and the city council.
And the people that want to come and make comments.
Again, with an eye toward making sure that our revenues are bigger than our expenses so that we maintain debt coverage and our obligation to our bondholders, which we still have, 36.
It's almost noon. I'd like to make a recommendation that 9 and 10, that we leave things for the rate review and see what that comes up with, and then go from there.
All right.
Second.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have a motion and a second? Would you restate your motion, Herb?
For 9 and 10, that we wait until we see the results of the 2 reviews that are coming up, and then we go from there.
Excuse me, when are those reviews due?
It would probably be first quarter of next year. Can I? Do
Yeah,
you
you can.
mind if I just say one thing? 10 is a totally different situation in my opinion. 10 is a transfer, or let's see, a full cost accounting of charges to the electric utility that are based on specific functions that are performed for the electric utility that they don't have the capability to do themselves. They don't have their own payroll department. They don't have their own HR department.
Okay,
they
but
don't
that
have their
still
own
should
IT
be part
department.
of the rate review.
It actually won't be part of the rate review, except in that that's how much it costs every year.
Yeah.
But the rate consultant won't go in and examine our G&A transfer and tell us whether it's correct or not. That won't be part of the purview of the rate study.
Okay.
They'll just say, hey, we get charged this X amount every year, and it's likely to go up by things. So the one is, hey, it's 6% of operating revenues. The other one is, hey, they have 100 employees out of 400, and therefore they pay a quarter of the costs of HR because they don't have their own HR department. That's full cost accounting, and that's, really, you can argue a little
put it
about
for
how we
number
do
9
it, but
then.
that's really how we're required to do it in order to run an enterprise fund. So they're kind of two different things, one being just a percentage and the other one being based on functions that they have to pay for that they can't perform themselves. So. You can still make that same motion. Just understand the rate study won't examine my G&A
Okay.
to say whether it's okay or not.
And I'm well aware of the time. Or I prided myself on always getting these meetings done by noon, except for the joint committee meeting with the finance. And so, but I'm going to blame this on finance as well, and Peter, because he did so many items that he brought up at once, and they did a good job. But I'm not going to take responsibility for this one either. I'll lay this to Mr. Gorey. But let's. I would like to make ask one individual question on 10. And
You want to go with 9?
so, if you'll modify your motion to just deal with 9.
All right. I'll modify my motion, just deal with 9.
Okay. Call a question. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That motion passes unanimously.
Who seconded that motion?
Did I second that motion?
Did you
No,
second
it
his?
was- No, Herb. Herb did.
No, Herb made the motion, and
Whittle,
I second.
the guy
okay,
on-
and he seconded the modified motion too, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, with respect to the G&A, the one question I have on this, I think we need to allocate some G&A to the electric fund. When we did the initial study, Jim, you did an initial study, I guess it's been 3 years ago now, 4 years ago, on what cost would be here. After the sale of the electric utility, you did an analysis. Well, these are the costs that we're going to shed. Okay, that number didn't tie in to the amount that we're charging for the G&A, the transfer. There was a delta, a difference between those two numbers. And while I think we do need to continue to transfer funds to cover those costs, I don't see anything in here that says that the city staff is doing more analysis of those costs, and Cindy's just said that the rate study or the optimization won't be looking into that. Is this the right number?
Actually, I will tell you that the staff, myself in particular, has done a very thorough analysis of this. If you look at the way this G&A was calculated 3 or 4 years ago before I came on board and the way that it's calculated now, it has shifted away from the electric utility back toward the general fund and toward other funds, in part because I've gone into each and every general fund department, and where I can find one, I have chosen a very objective measure, whether it be total number of employees, total number of computers, value of inventory on the racks, amount of cash collected through the cashiers. So there are very few of those departments that are, hey, it's about X percent of the time.
Most
anymore.
of it is quantitative.
And on top of it, and the reason for the disconnect between the G&A transfer and what we would save if we did away with the electric utility is fairly straightforward. And I hate to pick this example, but I'll use the city council department as an example. We have 5 city council members, and right now we very legitimately charge a percentage of their time to the electric utility, probably less than we should be given the amount of their time it takes right now. Once we sell the electric utility, we will still have 5 city council members, and they will still have a full-time job, but we will not have the ability to charge any to the electric utility that doesn't exist. There are a number of departments in that same situation, whether it be the city attorney, the city manager's office. There's a legitimate charge of their time to that utility, but if the utility goes away, it doesn't mean that they won't still have a full-time job and have other things that will occupy their time, and those costs can't be done away with. So.
Another example, and it's an economy of scale. The electric department and the water and sewer are both paying for meter readers. And the fact is they're splitting that cost proportionately to the number of meters and the revenues. But the fact of the matter is the electric goes away, the price per unit will go up to the water and sewer because you're still going to read those meters. But the same could be said if the water and sewer went away, the price per unit being read would go up on the electric. So those type of, where we have the economy of scale that we're using in providing these services. Human resources, you've got 3 people down there. If you did away with the electric or if you did away with water and sewer, the price per unit goes up.
Okay. Perhaps we can schedule a review of your analysis before the end of the year. I'd like to see that because I didn't know that you had done that. I'm glad to hear that you've done that. And
I mean, before almost all of them were arbitrary, and certainly some of them were, in my opinion, like many other things, sort of a shifting of costs toward the electric utility. And over the course of the last 3 years, whether it be my allocation of insurance, the G&A, et cetera, I've gone out of my way to sort of right-size that in anticipation of the sale so that we wouldn't, in one fell swoop, have all this stuff come back home to roost in the general fund. I've tried to find, objective, quantifiable measures to hang insurance, G&A, the rest of them on where I could. Are some of them still subjective? Sure. How much percentage of his time does he spend? What I charge versus the 80% of his time that he spends, I'm probably light on it right now. So, I'll be happy to.
I'm really glad to hear that we've done that because my impression was it was arbitrary and it was shifting costs to the fund. So that's good, and I think that would be good information to review both for us and for the public.
Mr. Chairman, can I have a clarification question that I didn't finish a minute ago before? Thanks. And one other point of clarification. If the sale of Florida Power and Light goes through, everyone that's on Florida Power and Light will then also be paying a franchise fee, probably, correct?
Correct.
So the franchise fee will not be coming to the city, but it would be going to the county. Is that correct? Or split?
It would be split. Right now,
But-
if you live outside the city, you pay a franchise fee to the county. You live inside, you pay utility tax. If we sell to Florida Power and Light, there would be a franchise fee on those customers inside the city and would be coming to
Outside.
us. And then the franchise fee on the outside the city would still go to the county.
Yeah, because the county's not talking about doing away with the 6%.
No, not anytime
franchise.
soon. That's
So
over $3 million.
I just want to make that clarification because I don't want it to appear that all of a sudden this 6% franchise is going away.
Right.
I mean, just as a point of clarification.
Right. I've never heard them talk about doing away
Well,
with it. It's over
but I
$3
don't-
million
yeah.
to their general fund,
Yeah.
and they,
But actually,
why would
it's
they?
going to go down if the rates go down.
A little bit, but
Well,
I wouldn't see
but
them
it's still going
eliminating
to be based on the 6%. Okay, that's all. I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Okay. So I'll make a motion that we keep the same overhead G&A allocation.
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. And I'm sorry, Charlie, did you have a comment on that?
Sorry,
And
just two quick things. I don't believe the Shores charges a franchise fee, do they? They don't. They do not. So partial answer, yes, the county would be, but the Shores would go down 6% because they don't charge a franchise fee. Just to clarify that. As far as the transfers are concerned, we have to run the city. And I'm so glad that we have our finance director here that's taking a look at it because it has clearly been abusive in the past, and that's part of the problem. Is we are asking the city of Indian River Shores residents to pay for employee salaries in the city of Vero Beach, and we've been doing that for quite some time.
Charlie, we've been instructed to not.
Well, I'm not talking about a suit.
I realize that, but I think you're going. Okay. in that direction.
But it is a problem that we're now having to face, and that's why we're having to face this. Thank you very much.
And Mark, I'm going to hold off on you because we are trying to get out, and you weren't standing up before. I accommodated Charlie because I should have called him up before I made the motion. So the next thing we need to talk about is okay. Mark, can you be brief?
Well, yes, Mark Mucher again. I don't see what the clock has to do with my right to speak.
Well, we try
to
try to keep things to the motion. Mr. Wilson was standing up to make a comment on the other item, and I ran the motion through beforehand, so I took him in. You were sitting down, and but go ahead. But
well, the item I forgot before was that I did make your argument that we were going in the wrong direction during the budget hearings. We were increasing the transfer to the general fund and not increasing the taxes. I understand you can't make a gross shift, but I do believe, and I think you believe, we should be making a token shift. And I guess, again, I forgot what I came up here to say, so thank you.
All right. Go ahead.
Okay.
I forgot what number we're on because
16.
16. Okay.
Yes, sir. This is to pursue renegotiating of the FMPA OUC contracts. We have recently gotten the release from both OUC and FP&L in which we can proceed on those discussions and negotiations. We have been in contact with Chris Browder of the OUC to sit down and start talking to him. We're also doing the analysis on doing a transmission study request. We have to pay for that, but we have to make a request through FP&L to do that transmission study to find out what improvements will be required. Sometimes the term transmission study is a misnomer. Nobody really believes that the wires themselves are going to have any major overhaul. It's probably going to be a substation improvements. could be up to $5 million on the substation transformer. So we could run into some of those type of issues, but we're putting all that together, get our request out, and we'll be pursuing that. As to the renegotiation with OUC, we've made it very clear they had, as a matter of fact, I believe their internal folks came down and did a presentation to the Utility Commission. We're talking about that capacity charge, and we're still pursuing that effort. But with the release of both FP&L and OUC, we're within our rights to do this now.
Okay. And have we gotten any response from OUC, or
other than,
or have we made a proposal yet?
No, we have not made a proposal. We're still putting together as to what their parameters of expectations are, because we're going to have to really sort of work through their general counsel. There's still the theory, make me whole, and how do we repackage what we've got in order to make that occur.
Okay.
There's also, we have a couple of assets. For example, when the transmission study is done, we're going to have to buy capacity on the market. That opens it up to a provider that we may be able to negotiate something to try to bring down our other costs in our contracts with OUC if they were the provider. At the same time, we might be able to bring down our cost on the, let's say, the substation improvements if FP&L became our contract provider for that capacity. And then that also gives us a negotiating with the market value of the demand charge of that capacity. So, and then we also have on top of that is our gas asset that is still a positive value. We understand that OUC has control of that for the next few years, but I think it's an asset that we would be willing to put on the market if it became something that we could negotiate to help mitigate some of our contractual agreements that we have in place now.
Okay. And just for clarification, the capacity that we have to buy isn't actually electricity. It's the ability, if on 1 or 2 days a year where we exceed the amounts that are under our normal contracts, or the few days a year, that electricity is available, but we have to pay for that 365 days a year.
Actually, there's two factors that would do it. Number one is if in the entire system that the transmission was not capable, we would have to have some mechanism by having the capacity. The second thing is under our contract with OUC, they count our units 2 and 5 as part of their generating capacity, so we would have to replace that. And you're right, whenever that goes on 1 or 2% of the year, that they would still have the right to draw on that capacity at their demand. So, and that could be anything from either a lack of transmission coming in, or it could be just a hot degree day and they're selling up to Georgia. And we have done that on occasions where we started our unit and OUC was selling to Georgia. We got credits for some of that, but they also reserve that right under our contract.
Okay. The Finance Commission made a motion to proceed with negotiations with all interested parties. I don't know that really what a motion there does, but let's go ahead and make that same motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Again, hopefully there's no public comment on that. If there is, please come up. Okay. Number 18.
Construct the requisite of T&D improvements, import power, decommission plant, mothball, maintain power plant, transfer station in place. Both of these really sort of ties in with our renegotiation of OUC. The transmission study obviously is geared toward the need of the plant and trying to replace it with a lower cost capacity. We think that it's pretty obvious that we're going to be able to take our plant offline and get capacity at a much more favorable cost. We think we're going to be able to cut the cost by about 3/4, hopefully, just based on market prices today. Those will probably be in 5-year incremental purchases of capacity. So every 5 years we'll be going through renegotiating, but it would be based on the market values at that particular time. So we are still working on it with the presumption that decommissioning is still would work in our favor. Again, the capacity charges would obviously determine that. The other is maintain the power plant transfer station in place. The way that Tom and I have talked about, if we decommission the power plant, we probably would just mothball it in place. The substation that is presently there has considerable battery backup inside the plant, and there's a lot of instruments that deal with that substation and that are located inside the facility. The lowest cost right now would be to maintain that and operate that substation in place. If sometime in the future that we felt like we wanted to spend the $5 to $6 million to take the plant down and then relocate the substation at some other location, which doesn't mean that we could move it off-site. We could move it to a corner of the existing lot and convert it into a little more manageable of a substation, but we still need that substation in that location. But our presumption right now is that the substation would stay in place, probably mothball the plant, and then use the equipment in there to keep us from making any further capital investments.
I think, so we provide $55 million capacity, 55 megawatt capacity under our OUC contract to the system.
That is correct.
And that costs us approximately $4 million a year.
Correct.
And so you think we can replace that 55 megawatts for about $1 million a year?
That would be our goal.
I'm just trying to go back through.
Yes,
okay.
that would be our goal.
Plus the cost of the upgrades.
That is correct.
Okay.
And then you would debt service the upgrades. So hopefully our cost would be maybe $250,000 to $500,000 a year.
And $5 million is a surprisingly low number from what I've heard passed back and forth before. So that's very encouraging if we can do it for that. So that we would recover if it was $5 million and we could save $3 million a year, we would recover that within the first 5 years.
Yes, sir. I think the payback, just based on preliminary numbers that we've gotten and looking at what the market has given to this point, it just appears that right now capacity is a pretty economical thing to acquire. The question is who we buy the capacity from, and then what is some of our trade-offs that may help us in that renegotiating.
Yes, and will our children and grandchildren be sitting here and bemoaning these decisions that we made as we do our ancestors?
Yes,
we just do the best we can with the information we have at the time we have it. I think I also want to just to highlight people when you look at the electric utility, you see the substation that's outside, but that's approximately half of it. Is that half of the? I mean, there's a significant piece of the substation that is actually inside the walls of the building.
Yes, sir.
And so it's not just that little footprint out there.
No, your entire battery backup, your switching gear. Evidently, when the plant was built, it was built with that substation as really a part of the plant itself, a function of the plant.
So, and I just think I think there's a lot of confusion about the substation there at the plant. It's just not what you see, like other substations you see around the county or the city.
That is correct.
You see all of the substation. You don't see it all there. So, and that's one of the challenges that we face with this issue. I think that it's. I hope that we'll be able to pull off some sort of miracle and do the Florida Power and Light sale, because that gives all of our employees at least a guarantee of a job for 2 years. And if we mothball the plant, they don't have a job. And that was one of the things that I really liked about the contract that we were able to negotiate, is we were able to take care of our employees and give them an opportunity going forward. So
I agree with that 100%.
I hope we can still pull this rabbit rev it out of the hat. But going forward, I think if we can't, we need to pursue this. And so any other discussion? I guess we make a motion. I'll authorize the continuation of the study to optimize power supply options in the short term.
Second.
Okay. Any public comment? Other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Does that complete this project?
That does. Thank you very much for your patience and the good discussion. And I will work with Sherry to get back with you regarding your next meeting, hopefully for you to review the RFP for the rate study in time for council to look at it on August the 18th.
Okay, and I'm hoping that our next meeting will be back to the second Tuesday of the month. And if, like I say, I'm willing to come in for a short meeting, if just to review the RFP.
It's relatively small, and you'd get it in advance, so it'd just be whatever comments you might have about it. So.
Yeah. Okay.
The 19th is the council meeting, so whatever it would be.
And all right. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
I have one question under Chairman Matters. I have some notes here. I haven't. I didn't get a note today. I have from Mr. Tonkel and Mr. Oshner that they were not going to be here. I didn't get anything from Mr. Christopher, and I haven't seen him. Is he out for the summer?
He resigned.
He resigned.
No, I need to check on that.
Okay.
He resigned from one. I don't think it's
Okay. I'm sure he's having a nice summer someplace where it's cool. So the all right. If we are missing members, though, we do need to encourage the city council to fill them. Members' matters. I believe it was Mr. Whittle that asked for the discussion of the hybrid septic system, or was it you, George?
No, it wasn't me.
He left, but
He's here.
I'd like to go ahead with this because I'm really excited about this and a big supporter of this too.
Yeah, he got up and left about right before 12.
Where's the mouse?
Oh, okay. I'm going to read over this while you're on.
When we got to 10, he had walked out at 9. So from 10 and 10:30, I was going back.
Good afternoon, Commissioner and Commission. Rob Bolton, Water and Sewer Director. Since the last time I've been up here on the step system, which is many, many months ago, we had made a big effort to try to get some legislation passed, and we had big support by Representative Mayfield and Senator Thad Altman. However, it failed to get through the proper committees at the state level, and therefore died, never got to the floors of either one. In the meantime, there was some additional efforts made by both the IRNA and also the City Council to see if the governor could possibly request DEP and DOH to look at their policies and find a middle ground to get the hybrid system moving forward. This email did that. So the IRNA, both a lot of their members and Audubon, everybody got behind it and asked the governor for his help. Also the mayor, through City Council, sent a letter to the governor, and we got a response back through the IRNA back in June. And if you look at the second page, the first paragraph up top, it says the DOH further agrees if DEP permits a sewer collection system that incorporates all or part of a septic tank system into its design and operation, the DOH will not impose any permitting requirements related to abandonment of the system or to its alternative use as part of the DEP permitted collection system. So therefore, we have the ability now to move forward with the hybrid system that we've been talking about. Since that time, go ahead.
Ron, I just wanted to clarify for background. The system that you're proposing pumps the effluent out of the septic tanks, leaves the solids there to be collected on a schedule to be determined based on the needs, lowers the cost of the infrastructure almost miraculously, very significantly, and in the event of it leaves these drain fields in place in these septic tanks with a bypass, so that if there's ever a problem with our system or the pumps, that the drain fields are still there. Correct. And that was the issue, that the ability to leave the drain fields in place as a bypass or as a backup to our system, that was the issue that we had to attempted to address legislatively and then did it through this regulatory.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I just maybe there's
Given
somebody
the history, since
maybe there's
such a
somebody
long
out there
time,
watching this one day that
that is fine.
understand that.
And I apologize for not going back through it. I figured due to time constraints,
I'm
I was trying to keep.
glad you didn't bring up the whole.
You try to bring me back in. So
yeah, I know.
Way,
so
go.
hopefully I was quick enough there. So
okay, and so where we're at now is kind of where do we go from here, and so I've been working with the health department, also with the county, and we developed a map last year that showed all the septic tanks. Since that time, we're trying now to prioritize areas that we would look at moving forward with this type of implementation. Volusia County did a report, and we are using that report now as a guideline to prioritize areas to look at. However, with their report, they looked at it more on a subdivision basis. So when they got to issues such as water indexes, they looked at it and said, well, does it drain to a river that has shellfish harvesting? Does it drain to areas that have public beaches? Or does it just drain to a drainage ditch that is a different class of water body? So we're working it on an individual parcel basis. So we're starting to modify their report a little bit and finding problems that when you apply it to a parcel basis versus a subdivision basis, it needs some additional tweaking for weighted factors. But in an effort to continue the whole process moving along, I wanted to come to the commission today and propose that we look at one area to get the design started and get in here we have to submit a permit, so I don't want to waste the time looking at the whole entire area when I can pick one area out, get started with that. In the meantime, we can work through with the health department and also the county. They ran into the same problem when they had tried to apply it, and then we can come back at a later time with the overall prioritization of the basins and all the different areas that we're talking about. So in here, I just wanted to show that we are working. It's based on a permeability index, the soil, how fast or how slow it will drain septic tank effluent, the water body, whether it's a public beach, a shellfish harvesting area, a drainage swale, or a drainage ditch of that matter. Also, the average age of the system. And water table elevations are a factor, and whether potable water is supplied or a density index. So it's still in a draft form. I really don't want to throw it out there and then everybody start picking it apart until we get it in a final form. We're really, really close to it. I think by maybe your next commission meeting, we may have something at that time. But as of this morning, I still couldn't get the final details worked out. So, but I do. Go ahead.
My understanding is that our initial application will be for our own bathrooms at the park.
We were going to do that. However, the grant that you had, that as a pilot project, the grant won't take effect for another year. So we decided to look, since we have now and that was based on the fact that we didn't have approval from the state, and we were going to have to spend a whole other year going through the legislative process. Now that we seem to have approval, we would like to go ahead and start one area and look at the entire area as a first step. So with that, I'll bring up the area we're talking about.
Okay, all right.
If you look at this map, and this area was also one that has always been brought up by the health department as being an area of concern because of the smaller lots, the proximity to the water, and what we're talking about, and I can't put the cursor over, but if you look at the top, north being the top, the area which we consider the Bethel Creek area.
Okay, I was
which
going to say this is Bethel Creek.
Bethel Creek House, north of that. If you look at the two little islands that are on the left side of it is Cache Cay. So it's the areas north of Bethel Creek to the city limits, which would encompass about 130 residential homes, would be the area that we would like to start design on. And if you look at the parcels that are red, the dark red would be considered very old systems, poorly drained soil, smaller properties. Some may have multifamily duplexes on them, so they're a higher contributor. So those are the areas that are of major concern. The next shade down would be ones that are also an issue, but a lot of times they're a little bit larger of a property, so they may not be that big of a contributor. So, and some of these colors may change, some may get darker. One of the things that we're finding is, if we consider just the water body index and say those that are abutting the water, well, the ones that's on the other side of the street is contributing more than, say, somebody that's all the way out west of town. So we want to get with the county, maybe develop some different shades or some different indexes for whether you're 0 to 500 feet from the water's edge, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 1,500, something like that, so that it gives a little bit more strength to those areas that are closer to the water body.
The lots that are white, are those empty lots?
White is on sewer.
Okay.
And white in those areas are probably either on sewer or where you see them, they're going to be vacant lots.
Vacant
because
lots.
How this was developed was it looked at anybody that was on sewer, and then it looked at those that had a building structure on it. So if it had a building structure on it and it wasn't connected to our sewer system, then it must have a septic system. So that's how we determined the property. So anything that's showing, yes, a white would be something that was a vacant lot. So they would still be able to build, but just with the new system in place at that time.
Okay. One of the earlier, let me back up. When you initially made this presentation to the county, county staff came back to the county commission with some objections to it. One was they said your costs weren't right because they had added to the cost to the homeowner because they had added think there's going to be septic tanks that need to be replaced. And
I never made a presentation.
No, you never did?
No.
Well, I got feedback from Commissioner Zork. This is the
Okay.
feedback I got from Commissioner Zork,
Okay.
is that your numbers weren't accurate because you weren't including the repairs of the septic tanks. But and my response to him, and I'm going to make this now, is if we have in this part of the inspection process, we happen to open up a tank and find out there's no bottom to it. They need to fix that, and that's not actually a cost to the system. That's just they need to have a good septic tank that doesn't leak, whether or not we have the system in place. So, I
think in my presentations that if you had a failing septic or a broken septic tank or a septic tank with no bottom or the sides were cracked and it needed to be replaced, that there was an additional cost of $1,000 to $1,500 to replace that tank.
Yeah.
So we looked at it as two scenarios. One is the tank is okay, the drain field's okay, or the drain field's starting to fail or something's going on that they go ahead and connect, and that would be a small pump station. And
Right.
and we're also discussing, you've brought up, well, how can we get these people to connect? And the mayor's brought that up. And my original idea of how we would move forward with this program was reactive. It was somebody came in, they had a drain field problem or some problem, and then the health department would say, okay, now you need to connect to the sewer system. Now that we're trying to get people to hook up, it's going to become now of a proactive type environment. And we need to think through the processes of how that's going to work, because one of the issues, like you said, with a septic system is, well, if it's broken or something, you're going to have to repair it. Well, I would have known that by the time the guy showed up at my door. If he's showing up at my door now in a proactive manner, the first thing I have to tell him is you need to go have your septic tank pumped out and inspected. So.
Right. Well, and I'm not too sympathetic to that, because if you have a broken septic tank and you are right on the river, you need to get it fixed. And so I don't have much sympathy for anybody who says, well, gosh, you didn't know, and now, But with this change from being proactive to reactive, I want to go back to the park. And I get confused whether it's the dog park or Bob McWilliams Park, or there's several different parks there right at the base.
They're all
of the
the same piece of property.
They're all the same piece of property, but we have some restrooms there.
Yes.
That are on a septic tank.
Yes.
I like the idea of our proving the concept there, and saying that this will work before we went to our citizens and said, you have to do this. I think ultimately we're going to get there. They're there in the Keys in Monroe County. You have to do it. I'm very reluctant to tell people or to say, and reticent to say, you have to do something. And so I'm a little disappointed to hear that we backed off. What would the cost to do that be?
Roughly $6,000 a piece.
And so how many pieces?
Two of them. It was like a $10,000 or $15,000 program.
So for $10,000 or $15,000, we can do a little proof of concept there with the hybrid system and those.
Yeah, I was just about to get that. At $10,000 or $15,000, you could put them in place at the parks. However, the restrooms were also going to be renovated at the time. So there was additional funding for, the restrooms have to be repaired and other things, and that's what all the funding was for. Yes, the portion of it outside the building was $10,000 or $15,000. I don't know what the cost of inside the building, and that was all part of that fine grant. Now, also, this is not mandatory. This is not mandatory.
Well, good. That's good to hear.
So that was part of the discussion, too, that I was get to about is nowhere are we saying that it's going to be a mandatory program. We were going to install the lines, and then as people connect, as people's systems failed from a septic tank standpoint, then they would connect. That's where I was bringing up the part of, I looked at it as a reactive type of situation. However, there's other individuals and other people in the community, and we've had discussions with different council members that they like the idea. The lagoon is in need of some type of help, and therefore maybe there's savings, or maybe there's ways that we can get out there and offer incentives for people to connect early. That's the type of program that now is a proactive type of program that we have to work through some of the whole ideas of what will the incentives be, how will we provide the incentives to the homeowners, and what will the homeowners' responsibility be to when they come in and just walk in and say, I'm in favor of this, I want to hook up. There's steps that need to take place. So that has not been worked out. I did receive a letter just from the articles in the newspaper of somebody along Indian River Drive that says, sign me up, I want to do it. So I think you have people in the community that are ready for it. If you look at Stewart, I went down and spent 4 hours with the director at Stewart the other day because they have a sign up and save program where there's roughly about $3,000 in savings. If somebody hooks up when they install the lines, if somebody comes in and says, and they notify them, say the lines are there if you want to connect, if they sign up within a year's time, they get a $2,000 discount. If they pay for the system within the first year, they get an additional $1,000. Or they can go ahead and start making payments on the system for 10 years at no interest. So they have an incentive program to get people to switch off of septic onto a sewer.
And that's just traditional sewer at the traditional cost.
No, they have a grinder system.
They do.
A little grinder pump. Very similar to the step system. However, the septic tank is abandoned and it's a little grinder pump. Now, the downside is there's no backup for emergency usage if there's a hurricane outage, other than the utility trying to run out there and pump everybody's system down continually. So you know, and he ran into the same thing with the, you know, he looked at STEP and one of the big, or leaving the drain field in place, and the first thing that happened was the Department of Health told him no. And so he stopped at that point. And you know, they've been moving their system forward for about the last 4 years. And they have a great system, and I think they've got a great program because they were anticipating roughly, I think, 10% connections per year, and they're at 51% of the people connecting because of the incentive programs that they've put forward. So I think we can look at some type of incentive program here. He wants to follow my program to see how it all works because, you know, there's other areas that he's going to be going into, and he liked the idea of leaving the drain field and just pumping the effluent. So, and not having to provide that emergency backup of huge amounts of manpower out there to keep the system running. So,
well, that's good. I'm glad that when you go from reactive to proactive, that's not forcing.
No.
That's. I mean, I'm glad we got that. I'm glad that I misunderstood that, or we got that clarified. Have we going back to our 2 bathrooms? Jim, do you have any idea what the cost, the inside cost would be?
No, I don't. But I think by doing it in the form that he's doing, the bathrooms were going to be an ideal scenario to really give, you know, the location and sort of a beta site, so to speak. But again, it was based on the grant. I'm not sure we would want to invest that much money into the restoration of those restrooms without the grant money, because you could probably build a couple of restrooms on the side cheaper. But if, for example, what Rob said, if we have a resident in our community that would say, hey, sign me up, I want to try it, that's going to be a much better site to try and have a beta site as opposed to our restrooms. That gives you a real life identity. And I think we're going to have several of those that will come forward, especially up in that area, because we had, for example, when he did the presentation on shore, Chuck being one, but when you do the presentation on shore, that was predicated on somebody making a request who may be the guy that now will sign up, because it's not dictated by everybody in the community signing up. So I think we're going to see people who will actually connect to a system once we get those 2-inch lines run throughout, and it's a relatively inexpensive initial cost from the city, because we'll do directional bore and won't have to tear up streets and that kind of stuff. So I think those are going to be much better sites that we can use and demonstrate on than using our restrooms. The restrooms were really the last case that, would be the last man standing type of thing, because we didn't realize that we were going to get the ability to do this at that point.
Okay.
And also in our budget meetings with the council, they wanted us to come back with a proposal to put into this budget to get this moving forward. So that's what kind of started this whole look in that area.
Ask a question. I'm just outside of that district, and I'd be all for coming by me, but on Conway over there. But having been through this twice before, I know that there's a percentage of people, I don't know how big it is here, that will never hook up voluntarily. Is there any plan for making it a requirement, which I personally think it should be eventually?
Here's the part of it's involuntary but partially voluntary. I mean, it's voluntary but partially mandatory. Is once the line is installed, then if their septic tank fails, they have to connect. If they have a septic tank failure, the state of Florida will tell them sewer is now available to your property and you will connect.
You can't fix it.
But until that point, they can remain on their septic system.
Well, I can fully understand that, especially on a pilot program like you're initially.
And if somebody's from up north and only comes down for 2 or 3 months out of the year, it may be 20 years before they ever have an issue with something,
Are we charging them impact fees for a connection?
Let's leave that up to the incentive program.
That's what I was going to say. That was a very simple incentive that we could do. We discussed that earlier.
And the way that's always been that impact fee issue of can you waive impact fees, and I think that Stuart did it the best way, and that is if you look at all the costs that are associated with it, you add all the costs up, and then you just give $2,000 incentive off the top. Where that was applied, it was applied across the board, or was it applied to directly the impact fees? Let's bring that back at another time and show what the incentive would be and go from there.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
Richard Winger, Mayor of Vero Beach. As you know, I'm very proactive on the lagoon. And City Council, I decided that the right thing to do here was to have a big enough pilot project without making it mandatory, that it had consequences both for the lagoon and as a roadmap forward. And I think this does that. I think it'll come back to you at such time as what the program would be. In other words, but it is envisioned that what would happen is early signers would have a better deal than those that wait. In other words, it would be proactive trying to get people to sign up. After all, the Indian River Lagoon is in bad shape. And, to move forward with anything smaller than this, I frankly would like to go bigger than this, but I accept staff's judgment that this is the right area and the right size project to be meaningful. But I think this is a wonderful step forward, and I think it can be done with reasonable public acceptance, in my vision of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited too. Rob, are there any measurements being made of the water quality, any Kilroys or anything similar to that in Bethel Creek area?
I can get with Brian LaPointe. We talked a couple different times, and that was not part of his area of research. However, he was looking at other areas for research and was strongly looking in this area at that time. I haven't talked with him since that period, and I don't know if, because he has a research assistant that's working on her master's degree that's doing a lot of the work, and I don't know if they've started pulling data, but I'll get back with Brian.
I think it would be important to have some measurements in here if we're going to sit back and say this works. It would be nice to have empirical evidence to show how much it works. And the
It would have to be a long-term monitoring.
it would.
Because if you look at some of the other, I mean, the Volusia County report was easy. It was, semi-scientific based, and it said, here are some parameters that we know affect septic tanks, and let's use these parameters. There's another model out there that actually models the nitrogen plume based on soil conditions and everything. And part of, in just reading briefly through that report, once you stop the effluent from going into the ground, it's not like the lagoon's going to clear up overnight. It's still in the ground, and it's still going to be flushed into the lagoon over a period of time, and slowly then will the amounts of nitrogen that is encapsulated in the groundwater work its way through to where eventually it's gone. It's almost like, any type of a pollution where you have a plume or anything of that.
Right, and then we have the issue
contamination.
of the captured pollutants in the sediment. But the fact that it would take a long term and be a long term project, I don't think is a argument to not do it.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that
I wasn't trying. It wasn't an argument. I'm just saying it was. Don't expect results overnight as soon as you hook the thing up. So.
No, but I think we need to be gathering empirical evidence because we have a long-term problem. I would encourage you all to the city to maybe go to some of the not-for-profits that are interested in this, and maybe there could be some funding for research in this particular area. Perhaps a Kilroy could be purchased or something similar to that. I don't know what the details of how to do the research, but I think that we may be able to get some grant money to do that particularly here.
And I'll get with Brian. I think probably there's benefits of both. I mean, Brian's is a grab sample with an analysis done in a lab, which is going to give you better results. Kilroy, though, is a constant monitoring of something that's occurring and seeing change. So some have benefits of either.
Right, and
I'll get with them.
Not being a scientist, and I realize there's disputes amongst the scientists as to the different ways we should sample, but we need to sample. Sure.
Yeah, Rob, is there a way that you're going to, or can you measure the success of individual installations, conversions, once that's complete? In other words, we're talking about the effluent in the lagoon. I understand. But once the conversion is made at an individual home, even in their yard, is there any way to say, hey, it's done right or it works?
Well, as far as the installation, we know that and we'll be able to monitor whether the effluent's coming to our property. Now, as far as how much the effluent starts to clear up across a piece of property, the only truly way to do it would be to drive monitoring wells between the septic tank drain field and the canal, and then take samples right out of the soil at whatever interface levels away from as you're going to the canal, and see how the degradation would occur over time. You're getting costly now. So I mean, we know that
so you might do that in a couple spots in this area. So this whole
we can see if we can find. It's intrusive into somebody's property now, going in there and driving wells into their property and coming by and taking samples.
I'm just curious how you.
But yeah, we can.
I don't think it would be that expensive to do soil samples every 6 months in the beginning and annually next to the drain field. Monitoring wells, and I think there's a lot of environmentally minded people that live here that would probably welcome being part of that.
And Brian's done
project.
all those types of things, so let me get with him and see what.
And like I say, there's different organizations. Commissioner Zork is on the board of one. That you may be able to reach out to him, and I might sit in the board of that one as well. So.
Anything to promote.
Yeah, let's do this. This is great. This is great news from the state, and
good to pursue something.
I have a question, and I'm not sure if it's properly addressed to you because you're not working on that, but for the city's point of view, is the sewage treatment plant going to be able to handle all this additional load?
Yes.
As is, or with improvements, or
as is, we have the capacity to handle all this load.
That's the ones just shown here.
No, the whole service territory.
The whole service territory. Okay. Good.
So if
When you-
people outside the city limits want the same similar system, we would be glad to talk with them and move in that direction.
That was going to be my question. If this is going to be applicable west of town where you are supplying water now, but no sewer.
It's just we really didn't feel on a political standpoint that we're not going to go outside our political boundaries to impose something on either anybody in the shores or anybody that's in the county. However, they are our customer. We're going through these motions for the lagoon, and we'd be glad to entertain those areas on a voluntary basis if they want to come in.
Well, but they would be under the same regulations that which say when your septic tank goes, if there is available municipal utility wastewater, you will hook up instead of repairing. So it would it wouldn't voluntarily, yes, but you do have the ability to
the mandatory
to do that.
part of the state regulations would still impose. It's just if the lines aren't there, then there's no mandatory.
But if they're close, they might be,
yes,
whatever.
Yes.
So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
All right.
No,
That's good.
Thank you very much, Rob.
Okay.
Any other issues to come before us today? Yes, Mr. Corey. Are you objecting to my blaming you for this extra hour?
Absolutely not. Thank you. Peter Gorey, I'm the chairman of the Finance Commission. I'll make this very one of the issues that we've been charged with, both our commissions, is reviewing the budget that was proposed. And we will be doing that at our next meeting. And here I'm just going to give some bullet points of what we're going to be looking at that has been proposed in the budget. One of our concerns is the potential for moving the water sewer plant. Whether it is financially viable, or are we doing it for aesthetic and clearing the waterfront reasons. And I've had discussions with both the city manager and Rob Bolton regarding why we would want to look at the finances before we get into a $25 million bond issue and dipping into our $10 million reserves to move the plant, given the fact that we have just heard that we may have to incur bonds and borrowing to be able to implement the septic. So that's one issue that we're going to address. The second has to do with storm sewers and runoff. I know that Monty Falls is looking at options of different alternatives, in fact, potentially making it a utility or an enterprise fund for storm sewer. The streets, which are beyond, obviously, the sewer issues. But finally, the governance. Two issues came up is at the meetings, part of the RFP that we didn't address previously is that to look at a utility authority for the governance of, as opposed to its existing configuration, and that would be part of the RFP for the optimization. So if there are any questions, I just wanted to be brief to, these will be on our agenda coming up in addition to...
What is the date of your next meeting?
14th? Sherry?
I don't have it on me now.
Okay,
don't
can
have
you
that
just...
I believe it's the 14th of August.
Okay. All right, if you can perhaps send us their, when their agenda's released, if you could send us an email with the link to that, and then encourage people to attend that meeting.
Zach, I just wanted to give a heads up as to some of the issues we're going to cover, because there is now a confluence of storm sewer, what Rob is doing, septics, and the future of moving the plant that has a 30 to 50-year useful life currently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sure.
Richard Wayne again. I think I agree with everything Peter said. I think what we have to do is take our available resources and do the best we can, whatever that is, for the lagoon first. That's really all I have to say. So that could stage when things happen that City Council would like to do. But that's my belief, that we need to look at first things first.
Thank you. And our next meeting date, Sherry?
It would be the second Tuesday of the month. As
Second
normal.
Tuesday of
Yes,
the
sir.
month. Okay. All right. And motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.